folks, we'd like to get this regular council meeting of February 2019 underway. So I'm going to ask for the adoption of the agenda. Do I have someone to move the adoption of the agenda? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Brooks Hill, all those in favor? How about the adoption of the minutes from the regular council meeting of February 12, 2019? Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Charlotte, do I have a seconder? Councillor Brooks Hill, all those in favor?
I'd like a discussion, Your Honor,
Okay.
on that motion.
Go ahead.
Nothing serious. I'd just like to raise the idea that, you know, the part about the social media, I'm not sure the way the minutes are written is exactly a great portrayal of what exactly happened at that point in time. I understand that that was your intent, but I believe it was more, you know, conflictual than that. And so, you know, a suggestion from me would be that the Mayor and Councillor Cross exchange differing views on the relative merits of posting city issues on social media or something like that would be more accurate at a high level.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable in putting that in the minutes, or how do you feel, Ms. Law?
We need a resolution to amend the minutes.
You want to make a resolution to amend the minutes?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bryant. Any further discussion on that? I'll ask Ms. Floyd to add that to the minutes.
Do you have it written down?
I do, yeah. Let me give that to you.
Okay. With that amendment, are you comfortable in me asking you a question for adoption of those minutes?
I am.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from the minutes of February 12, 2019? Okay. I'm going to move on to Development Services. Item number 5A, we have a presentation. Mr. Sturgeon.
Sorry, Your Worship, that was faster than normal.
Oh, that's all right.
So we're doing things from now on.
Councillor Yunker.
So this is the same thing we went over last one, but this one's just the actual issuance of the DP now?
Correct.
Notice has been given.
Right, I read that to the surrounding.
Within 100 meters, subject
Yeah.
property is mailed and it's hand delivered.
So we just go through the whole presentation again?
They'll probably summarize.
It'll be the
Okay, I'm
abbreviated.
just wondering, because now we just actually pass or issue it, if we vote. Okay, thank you.
Well, Your Worship, while this isn't as formal as a true public hearing where there's a statutory requirement for one, we've made it a practice of informal hearing. If someone has come in response to the notice and is in reality, wanted to speak relative to this, felt their interest in property was affected,
Okay.
we've been providing them the opportunity. So.
Oh, good to know,
Good.
thanks. And,
Councillor Elliott.
So once we do this, then it goes to an evaluation and a third reading?
No, this is a development variance permit. This is not a bylaw.
Okay.
So there's a statutory requirement to give notice. You're going to consider varying the provisions of a land use regulation. There's no statutory requirement for a hearing, but because notice is given, it implies that there is some opportunity to be heard. And that's why we invite comments. And we've gone the extra step of saying if you've come to the meeting, you want to make a comment to council about the matter, you can.
oh, good. Thanks for that.
To public hearing.
Yeah, we got you some time.
There you go.
Okay, so I'll just do an abbreviated version of my presentation from 2 weeks ago, and just on the development variance component of this application. Just as background again, to refresh your memory, we're up on Highway 23 north of town. And once again, our OCP designation is neighborhood mixed use, and our zoning is C5, tourist commercial. You'll recall that we talked last time about a development permit for a 30-unit motel with parking and landscaping. And just a refresher, that's what it looked like. And there was our site plan with the two separate buildings. here today. Two separate buildings on there with the landscaping surrounding it. And then, of course, there was a DVP going along with it. So the three components of that variance was to increase the maximum height from 10.5 to 11.1 meters, and to increase the number of permitted stories from 2.5 to 3, and to permit portions of some of the parking within the front yard setback. So I went over this last time, but the justification again was that there's no actual increase in building height, and we're happy with the character of it. We don't anticipate any negative impacts to neighboring properties as a result of these variances, and that the parking is reasonable. Just a quick reminder of the parking variances right there. And I'm pointing at the building there to show the height increase. And as I went over last time, the green shows what would be permitted by bylaw. The red shows the average height calculation, and then you can see the overlaid over the building, so it's not functionally a higher building. We sent out notice to all properties and occupiers of those, owners of properties and occupiers of those properties within 100 meters of the site. That's per our development procedures bylaw, as Alan was just mentioning. That's also required in the Local Government Act. We received one written comment from a neighbor to the south. I'm going to back up to the aerial right here. Mr. Chabot, did council receive a copy of that correspondence?
I haven't seen it.
Okay. I'll go over it just briefly right now. The neighbor is located down here, 1819. They were concerned with issues of trespass. We're expecting that some residents may choose to walk down Highway 23 and then make their way onto Pierce Drive right here, and there is a pedestrian access. There's a concern that there may be a shortcut option taken there. During the winter, there's snow plowed along the shoulder, and that is, I didn't have time to get out there today to ground truth this. We just got it this morning, but I'm told that it blocks that pedestrian walkway. So I'm going to investigate ensuring that that remains clear throughout the winter, and we've spoken with the operator of the hotel, who has indicated that they would be willing to enter into what we call a good neighbor agreement and come up with some measures to make sure that trespass doesn't occur, exchange phone numbers, and to be able to have an ongoing communication between those two property owners to avoid that kind of nuisance. So we consider that aspect to be resolved. It's not directly related to the variances themselves, but it is still an issue of concern. And that, again, was the only comment that we received. And so our recommendation to you today is to approve the DVP for issuance, and that will also facilitate the issuance of the development permit that goes along with it.
Councilors, any of you that have any questions on this one? Councilor Juncker?
Your worship, thank you, Mr. Sturgeon. Just it's kind of relating to this hotel. I just wanted for public clarification because I had a few questions this week about it from Mr. Thomas through the chair. Some people have approached me with concerns about the sewage issue in town, and that they believe that our sewage plant is at capacity and this will further cause a problem with the sewage plant. Could you clarify whether or not the adding of this hotel to the sewage plant is going to cause a problem?
Your worship, the sewer treatment plant, we have a grant application in for almost $10 million of a $30 million project. We expect to find out about that grant application in the next couple of months. In terms of the, and that is to increase the capacity of the sewer treatment plant. In terms of the capacity of the existing treatment plant, we are operating within the requirements of our operating permit for capacity. Every house or business that is added is definitely a concern. From the city's regulatory perspective, probably the main consideration for servicing applies at rezoning. This is a property that is already zoned for this use. It's pretty difficult to make a decision without on the basis of one particular property. Zoning is really the only time that you have that specific authority as council. From a new subdivision perspective, that's another situation where the city generally has that ability. We will reach the capacity of the sewer treatment plant sometime in the future. That really depends on how fast we grow, and we're aware of that, coming up as a problem. We're monitoring the situation to work out how soon it's going to happen. It's not directly linear to development overall. There's certainly our biggest issue occurs on wet weather days with stormwater entering the system. So that's a huge part of the days when we are close to capacity. So a new development doesn't actually mean that we will, it's not a direct linear increase.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification.
And in Councillor Juncker, with this property, there's already a bunch of cabins on it that are going to be replaced by these hotel units, so it may not make a significant difference.
Right, yeah, that was my understanding, Your Worship, and that's what I had told the public that had asked. It's good to have clarification from our director.
Councillor Elliott?
I think my question was related to the cabins and the discarded trailers that are on the lot. They're in pretty rough shape. They were a bit of an eyesore for the last number of years. Are they still in place, or have they been removed? I haven't knocked that way in a while.
Through your worship, they're still there. My expectation is that they'll be removed as soon as the snow's gone. The owner will apply for a demolition permit. They're not taking off.
They were occupied over the last, there was a temporary summer housing. The heating was pretty minimal there. They were used as kind of people would rent it. So I know people were staying there. So not last year, but the previous 2 years.
Any other questions from council before I go to the gallery? So is there anyone here in the public gallery that would like to speak to this issue with the development permit? Is there anyone that lives next door that has some concerns that would like to speak to that? You're welcome to do so at this time. Hearing none, I'm going to move on. So there is a motion in your package. If someone cares to make that motion. Councillor Juncker?
Your Worship, motion that development variance permit DDP 2018-10 be approved for issuance.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ryan. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Mr. Sturgeon, we'll move on to item 5B.
Thank you, Your Worship. Same scenario here. We have a development variance permit that we considered at the last meeting for 103 Victoria Road East. This was for placement of a LED sign within an existing freestanding sign, which you can see over here. Again, our zoning C1 and T5 is our OCP designation. This variance is to vary the provision of the sign bylaw. As I just mentioned there, we've considered that a limited sign, which is prohibited. Just an overview of what that might look like there. I discussed last time some of the concerns that we had. We'll go over that again. And I discussed the conditions that are placed into the permit to mitigate those concerns, particularly with respect to intensity of the light and driver distraction. We felt that this mitigated the concerns and avoided unnecessary flashing or glare on neighboring properties, while still aligned with the convenience that we talked about, and we didn't see it as being too close to any existing residences. So we recommend today that the development variance permit be approved for issuance. I didn't include a slide, but I'll note that this was also sent out to properties and owners within 100 meters, and we received no comment.
Councilors, any questions on this motion? Hearing none, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to say anything regarding this development permit, changing the sign from a static sign to an LED sign at the Region Hotel. Seeing none, I'm going to commend you, Mr. Sturgeon, for working with Beruschi Enterprises to come up with something that works for the community, and understanding that Fred Beruschi himself has been very instrumental in making sure that what was brought to the table was going to be something that would set precedent moving forward in a positive nature.
Thanks, Your Worship.
So I appreciate that. So is there a councillor that would like to put this motion on the table? Sure. Councillor Cross?
Yes, that the development variance permit DVP 2018-08 be approved for issuance.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Juncker. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'm going to be voting against this motion. I think that if the city of Revelstoke is going to permit LED signs, this is probably the way to do it. I'm not concerned about this one sign in particular, but just the precedent that it sets. And the fact that down the road there might be 15, 20, 30 of them in town, I think that's going to change the character of town in a negative manner.
Thank you for your input. Anyone further have any other comments or concerns?
Was that addressed with, what was his take on it? He was here, he spoke to it at the last session, is that right?
It's not something we can address through a single variance permit, to be fair. If there any other, we'll assess the impact of this the next time we do receive, excuse me, any other variance permit and with any future amendments to the sign bylaw.
Councillor Cross?
I was just going to comment that I thought we talked about this possibly coming back as a more encompassing bylaw around this type of sign last meeting.
Yeah, we'll talk about a sign bylaw going forward.
Maybe we could, I share your concerns, Councillor Brooks Hill, and maybe we can deal with it at that point. It's a tough, I understand where you're coming from, for sure.
Okay. Any further questions or concerns on this motion? So I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Note Councillor Brooks Hill is opposing. Thank you. We're just going to go on to announcements from the mayor. All of council have been notified about this. I received a phone call from Lisa Bair, Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, last Tuesday after they presented, the provincial government presented their budget. Her call was to inform us that RMI funds have now been added to the government's base budget and will be ongoing. So previously, we were always worrying about if it would carry on or not, and had found out that it would go on for 3 years. It's now going to be ongoing. And so the previous amount that was issued was somewhere between $10.5 million and $13 million. It's now been bumped up to $14.7 million. And my ask of Minister Bair was if the capped amount that we would receive would go up to the amount we collect on MRDT taxes. And at that point, she could not confirm that. But we know that it's ongoing, so we appreciate that good news moving forward. So I just wanted to let you know that. So we're going to move on to delegations and presentations. And Cathy English is here with the Museum and Archives. So Cathy, if you'd like to come to the podium, please.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Sulz, and councillors. Thank you for allowing me to come today to present our annual report from Revelstoke Museum and Archives. I have one of our board members, Susan Black, with me here today as well. In my written report, I provided a history of the museum and our long-standing relationship with the city of Revelstoke. We are proud and pleased to hold, preserve, and make available the history of our community through our archives, artifact collection, and exhibitions and programs. Among our holdings are records from the city of Revelstoke, going back to incorporation in 1899, including tax assessment rolls for the years 1900 to 1974, and early correspondence and other material. We are truly a community museum, and we are committed to our mandate of celebrating our history and heritage through the operation of our public community museum. Every time I report to the city, I mention that we have had another busy and successful year, and this past year was no exception. We had more than 11,000 people in the museum during the past year, as well as museum tours. They came for programs, events, meetings, and even shopping. Our financial report reflects a higher number of people coming for paid tours and a higher number of members of our association. We hosted 15 school tours for grades 1 through 11, many of them using our recently created curriculum-centered programs. And we also run our annual children's programs in the summer for children ages 4 to 12, and had good attendance at those as well. Our Brown Bag History Series is now in its 17th year, and in the past year we had an attendance of 670 for 21 sessions, which makes an average attendance of 32. And I also conducted downtown walking tours and heritage cemetery tours during the season. My report also outlines some of the many other programs that we participated in during the past year. We are proud to be part of the community, and we find many ways to contribute and to share our history. As well as our usual projects and programs, we had two major projects this past year. One was the launch of Revelstoke, Creating a Community, Brown Bag History Volume 2 on September 12th. More than 80 people turned out for the book launch and, of course, for the cake from Modern Bake Shop. And we believe that the book may have been the most popular Christmas gift in Revelstoke in 2018. We also launched our new exhibition, Stories Beneath the Surface, on October 18th, with again more than 75 people in attendance. The new exhibition tells the stories of the communities that were displaced by the opening of the Hugh Keenley Side Dam at Castlegar in 1969. Many local people were consulted and interviewed for this exhibition, and we will continue to collect their stories. I have worked with local teachers to develop grade-appropriate lessons for this exhibition, and we've already had 5 classes from grades 2 to 5 in to learn about this topic. We secured funding from the Museum's Assistance Program of the Government of Canada, as well as the Revelstoke Credit Union and CBT Community Initiatives, to install fixed and rolling shelving in the basement to house our large artifacts. So now all of our artifact collection is well housed and properly tagged and entered into our database, so everything can be easily found and accessed. Our dedicated garden volunteers made some improvements to the Heritage Garden this past year, including adding a Japanese bed to the front and some Japanese trees. The Heritage Garden is well used, and visitors appreciate our lovely downtown oasis. With funding from CBT Heritage Grants and the Resort Municipality Initiative, we've been able to upgrade some of our first floor exhibits. We've installed a new multicultural exhibit and are currently working on changes to our business exhibits. We will be adding a large map panel to help visitors understand the region and creating a new exhibit about Mount Revelstoke National Park, highlighting both the human history and the natural history of this special place. These new exhibits will be completed this spring. March 1st, 2019, that's this coming Friday, is the 120th anniversary of the incorporation of the city of Revelstoke. And I think we can all congratulate ourselves on making this an incredible place for all of us to live for over 120 years. We will be celebrating with a special event that evening at the museum from 6 to 8 p.m. We're calling our event Citified and Mystified, and we've created a mystery for visitors to solve. Will they view the exhibits and enjoy some appetizers and beverages? And it is our pleasure to invite all of our city councillors to attend as our guests. We are applying for funding this year to continue to collect stories of the Columbia Valley from Revelstoke to Arrowhead and Beaton. Our new exhibition, Stories Beneath the Surface, was just the beginning of this project and has brought many additional people forward who have information and stories to share. We hope to produce a short film based on the interviews to include in our exhibition and on our website. We are currently working on upgrades to our website to make it more relevant and easier to navigate. The new site will be launched this spring. We also use social media and traditional media to advertise our events and inform people about our history. I've had some of our Facebook posts reach an audience of over 40,000. Those ones usually involve snow. We are fortunate to have a really skilled and active board of directors, as well as an amazing group of about 45 volunteers who donated more than 900 work hours for tasks such as gardening, event planning and setup, school visits and children's programs, collections management, carpentry, and many other tasks. Their skill and dedication help to make the museum the vibrant place that it is. I would like to extend our sincere thanks to the City of Revelstoke for their ongoing support of the museum. We are committed to our mandate of preserving and sharing our history and look forward to continuing this for many years. We appreciate the help and support of Laurie Donato, Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, as well as the Public Works staff that help to keep our beautiful heritage building in such good repair. Thank you.
Thanks, Cathy. I think we all very much appreciate you and your colleagues at the museum. We know that we can send people there for a history lesson and information about the community. I've always loved the tour of the cemetery. I can honestly say I've only been on one tour of the cemetery and got cornered as to where everybody was. And I said, you need to talk to Cathy. She'll fill you in on everything. I just know the last 40 years. So anyway, we appreciate everything that you do and are grateful for what you're doing and the difference in the exhibits and how they change and how it actually enlightens us who've been here for a while. Appreciate that. Is there any of the councillors that have any questions or comments that you'd like to give to Cathy? Councillor Reid.
I just have a comment. As a relative newcomer to Revelstoke, I'm blown away by the quality of the content and the dedication of the volunteers and the staff at the museum. I think it's such an important resource, especially since we do have such a rich history and culture. And it doesn't serve just, existing residents, but as you mentioned, visitors and families that come to move here, or families, people that want to start families, and the children at the schools who are doing those school tours. So I think it's just, I don't know, I've really enjoyed serving as the city liaison on the committee because it's incredible the amount of work that goes in, and you can see it in a lot of different parts of the community. So I really appreciate it, and it's great.
Any other comments? Councillor Barritt?
One of the issues, I guess, for you is access for handicapped or disabled people. Is that being addressed?
Yes, that's something that we have looked into. We haven't come up with a solution to that yet. I think our first step is to really find out, because we're a heritage building as well, we're a 90-plus-year-old post office building, it does present some issues, but that's something that I'm hoping I can work with city staff to come up with some solutions. I see that our neighbors, the Railway Museum, have come up with a good solution for a lift in their building, and I'm hoping that it's something that we can look into as well. It definitely is an issue with our aging population, including our aging curator.
Another question, just the collaboration between the Railway Museum and the City Museum, is it pretty close, or is there a good relationship?
Yeah, we have a group that's been ongoing for several years called the Revelstoke Museums and Gallery Collective, and it's mostly a marketing collective. So we do joint marketing. We were able to pool our resources to increase our advertising dollars. So we will work together to have a page as a group in the Revelstoke Visitors Guide and some of the other products that the Visitor Center offers, and other products we've been able to contribute. And we keep each other up to date on events and try to avoid, doing events on the same date, or so we do collaborate. We have looked into the possibility of trying to get a person doing some joint grant applications so that we could hire one person, for example, to do collections management or archival work. But we haven't. We did one application last year to try to do that, but we haven't been successful in getting the funding for that. But that's something that we have looked into as well.
Yeah, I think you could amplify if you're pitching for some kind of grant funding. You combine the numbers that you visitation for both entities. All of a sudden, you become a little more higher in the ranking, I think. So.
Anyone else, councillors? Cathy, thank you for coming today. You and Susan appreciate your input, and we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, item 7B, another delegation, Revelstoke Snowcross Film.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start off first with just a bit, and then we'll do this. I'd like to thank His Worship Mayor Sulz and Revelstoke City Council for the opportunity to speak to you today, to introduce myself, the Film Commission, and the benefits of attracting film production to the city and the region. In 2017, I was contracted by the Barritt Regional District as Film Commissioner. My name is David Barritt. Since the early 1980s, I've been fortunate to make a career out of making movies. I've worked on such projects as Jumanji, Elf, 21 Jump Street, Riverdale, and most recently, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I've had the good fortune to work both on-set and off-set. I've worked in the rental divisions, I've worked with studios, and more recently as a consultant evaluating crews and equipment. I'm a member of the Film Union, IATSE Local 891, and I've seen firsthand this industry grow into a $3.4 billion industry. I remember the days when we were hitting $800 million and thinking it was a fabulous year. As Film Commissioner, I assist film productions when coming into our regions, whether large budgets or small, independent short films or big budget features. We assist through location scouting, navigating the communities. We help with branches of government, such as highways, lands, and resources, First Nations, and of course, corporate and private stakeholders. We work with our local governments to help understand the impact, as well as the benefits of accommodating film productions. Attracting these decision makers to our city and regions have a terrific benefit, from direct production revenue through accommodations, local hires, rentals, to crews in restaurants, shops, monies directly into the hands of the local businesses and homeowners, not to mention on-screen images that translate into tourism, media coverage, now social media, and in time, film tourism. Over my time as Film Commissioner, I've seen a lot of interest in Revelstoke. I've seen multiple productions with estimated revenues of into the tens of thousands of dollars, of which I believe this number is very conservative. British Columbia's film industry is still growing and has begun yet again to change. With the rise of online stream giants such as Netflix, Amazon, Disney, and now Apple, all building their online platforms with self-made content. These companies are bringing greater numbers of productions to the world and to British Columbia. Establishing offices and production hubs, they are reaching farther into distant locations, looking for greater tax savings, support for industry, local labor, and communities with incentives. I see Revelstoke positioning itself to draw the attention to the BC film industry. The appointment of an economic director with an openness to see the potential, providing strong professional policies around filmmaking and timely decisions and approvals. I believe together we can attract all sizes of productions and budgets, creating a reputation of delivering not only great landscapes and architecture, but a great amount of great food choices and taverns, which is a must when filming on location. I look forward to working with the City of Revelstoke, the Director of Economic Development, Tourism, and the various departments that will aid in the development of Revelstoke as a film destination. Thank you again, Your Worship, Mayor Sulz, Revelstoke City Council, and Ingrid Braun for helping to bring this opportunity to speak today. I'd now like to introduce you to a director, Steve Hall, and producer, Turner Simpson of Stacked Films, who are looking to bring an exciting short film project into the City of Revelstoke. They have a wonderful presentation for you, and I'll now turn the table over to the two gentlemen here. Thank you very much.
Just before you go, I want to say thank you for what you've done for the community. We've had some conversations in the past when you were looking at buildings for other productions and whatnot, and I appreciate every time we have a film that's being done in the community. People are excited because they get to be a part of.
That's right.
Our community gets focused on, and we're happy about that. And you leave a few shekels in the genes of our business owners, and we're very happy about that.
Indeed.
So thank you. Gentlemen, come on.
Thank you.
going to show part of a sample video that is similar to the film that we want to create, and it was filmed in Rossland, BC. I would like to thank His Worship, Mayor Sulz, and Revelstoke City Council for their time today to allow me to, I'll take this time to allow me to introduce myself. I'm Turner Simpson. I'm a producer for Stacked Films. This is Steve Hall. He is a director and founder of Stacked Films. Today we would like to present to you Brock Hoyer's The Way Out. That's it. This one-of-a-kind film is unique to the action sports world. It includes two-time X Games gold medalist Brock Hoyer riding his snow bike through the city of selected routes that we have planned, and it helps promote the sport of snow biking, and it helps promote the city of Revelstoke as well. We will also have sponsors and availability for local businesses to come and partner with us and promote them as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so our goal is to create something really unique and something that nobody's really ever done on a motorized snow bike before. It's a pretty new industry, but it's something that's exploding. And as you guys know, in Revelstoke, you see these things around all over the place. So it's kind of our chance to jump on this and get the exposure that these bikes need, and then also expose the city of Revelstoke and bring in the population that you want to be able to flood the mountains with these machines.
So we are working to partner with stakeholders. We have engaged with economic development and tourism, and some of the missing pieces in order to make this whole thing happen are flagging and security for partial road blockages, local production assistance to help set up the construction of our set and tear down and move around. Services such as police, fire department, and ambulance services for safety reasons, and because we need, just in case anything goes wrong, he is on a motorized vehicle, right? We also ask that we will have no fees or permit payments to be issued to the production company.
Yeah, so what's that? The city will receive promotion film, logo, video, posters, social media. There's a lot of opportunity for small businesses to be featured throughout the project because we're going to be going through the streets of Revelstoke. There's going to be a lot of storefronts, a lot of exposure for people, and this is going to hit in, at the low end, tens of millions. So we're looking at a really, really big reach worldwide, actually. There's going to be a lot of reach in North America, but it's also going to branch out throughout the world. Film will have a wide reach of people across the world. City will receive cinema quality footage to use at their discretion. So while we're filming, we'd like to do something for the city and tourism. We'd like to get some really, really cinematic, high-end quality video for the city of Revelstoke to be able to display in however you guys see fit throughout whatever platforms, media you guys want to. So a little bit of experience and background on me. I'm the founder of Stacked Films. I worked with Vancouver film industry for years as a camera assistant. Did a lot of grip work, a lot of electric work. Our team is top notch. One of our main producers is Johnny. He produces The Amazing Race out in the United States. He worked for Red Bull Media House for years. He was the producer and founder of Free Ride Entertainment out of Nelson, who's now out of Seattle. Yeah, he's amazing. Anthony Vitale is going to be our cinematographer and director of photography. He's an award-winning cinematographer, And if you guys have ever seen The Art of Flight, I think it was filmed, yeah. So he was one of the cinematographers on that movie. So it's just unbelievable. And Eric Crosland, he's the founder of Sherpa Cinema, and he's done some filming for Planet Earth. So these are top guys. Yeah, back to you. Oh, and sorry, Brock Hoyer, our the guy who's going to be doing everything. He's the best in the world. He wins when he goes to competitions. He wins them, and he's confident. He's looked at maps. We've done a walk around and everything, and looked at the city. We met at one of your guys' Snow MX Bike Nationals, and he loves this area, and we just kind of brainstormed this idea to come up with something really cool and something that can showcase his talents in this city.
Awesome.
So we have come up with dates. For our preferred dates would be from April 1st until April 8th. And this kind of outlines where we would be at each date so that we can provide, or be prepared to provide flagging and be prepared for the road blockages, detours, whatever's necessary. So as you can see, between Wilson and King on Front Street, Charles Street between Douglas and Victoria, Mackenzie Ave between 2nd Street and East Victoria Road, 2nd Street East and Victoria Road, 1st Street West between Boyle Ave and Connaught Ave, and the alley behind the Modern Bake Shop and Cafe between 1st Street and 2nd Street, and then back to Connaught Ave.
And it's actually April 1st to 10th. I think we're just missing
First
a slide.
slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's probably on the next note. Just missing it.
For sure.
Yeah, so emergency response, we want to be able to have ambulance, RCMP, everyone, on fully alert and staged, because this is going to be quite the production, but we need to have the proper safety procedures in place. Each respective organization will be in immediate proximity in case of medical emergency. Yeah, I just want to voice that we need
Safety is definitely
safety
first
is
in our
number one, and public safety as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our environmental awareness. So as we did today, we walked around the city and looked at all our potential spots of filming. So we listed and are going to continue to list on-site hazard awareness, such as power lines, fire hydrants, everything along the streets, planters we saw today as well. Psychological consideration, that's more for our crew and everybody involved. That's going to be making sure everybody's fit for duty, shows up to work, sober, ready to take this serious, of course. And then weather considerations, can't control the weather, but we planned it for a nicer time of the year so that we can get some decent weather, hopefully. And then, yeah, constant communication between everybody. I think that's really important from every organization.
And maintaining adequate space between public and personnel, that's going to be a big one. We're going to have people blocking any kind of little cracks and crevices we can to avoid the public from sneaking in and getting their camera phones and getting the shots and whatnot, just for safety reasons, not for any kind of leaking exposure or anything.
That's everything.
And then, yeah, that's our...
Well, gentlemen, that sounds exciting. My only concern is you're in April, we're going to be in the spring. You're going to be able to pack snow in if you need that. So
yeah, we have all that kind of designed. I mean, realistically, that is the most optimistic date that we could ever hope for.
Right.
Realistically, it's going to get pushed back to February of next year.
Okay.
So, like I said, if every single person gets back to me out of 150 people that I've been contacting within 3 days, then sure, we can make it happen. But like I said, realistically, it's going to be pushed. But this is going to be quite the production, so cramming it into 3 weeks would be, hopeful at best.
Yeah. Councillor Cross, Councillor Young.
Yes, thanks guys, it looks exciting. In the past, and I'm fully supportive of the film industry, love it. It brings a lot into town. I'm a little concerned about the invasiveness of this particular project. So in the past, we've had film crews in town. Streets get closed, but access to businesses does not. How do you view that working with your film?
Well, we're going to try as hard as possible to limit the amount of time that the street's shut down to 3 minutes per shoot, just so we get the shoot, and then we'll open the other side of the road. So we're not going to block the roads completely. The jumps are going to be mainly on the sidewalks, kind of around the sides, because as you know, you can't ride a snow bike on the pavement. So we're going to have everything kind of on the side. So the streets will still be fully functional. We're just going to need a partial blockage for the exact time of shooting, and that'll all be.
So in my experience, a 3-minute shoot usually dictates 1 to 2 hours of
Oh, of course, yeah.
shut down on, so accesses to those businesses would be not there for that time.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay.
We will open, everything, all the access and everything, but then when it's time to go, when it's go time, then we'll ask people to, vacate the premise and then have the perimeter, do the shoot, open it back up. Just because we know it's an invasive process and we know it's going to be, affect businesses and stuff, so we want to be as accommodating as possible.
Thank you. Just continue. So if a business, a restaurant, or a store has people in it, and then you close it down, you're going to have some coordination with the business to prevent people from walking outside.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If I may speak to that point, actually, through the policies and procedures of filming within the cities of Revelstoke, it is a maximum 3-minute lockup that they have. They may be on the street for, say, 8 hours in the day, but what will happen within that 8 hours is they'll be shooting both wide shots, which may be a 3-minute lockup, to actually coming into tighter shots, which would be no lockup at all. So the incumbents, if you will, to various businesses and the locals being able to move around will be very minimal within that 6 or 8 hour day of shooting. Probably even less than 3 minutes, if you will, at each go. And with respect to the businesses and the people being inside, prior communication, and then on the day communication, and having PAs, if you will, within those businesses or those establishments to be able to hold traffic. Bike goes by, traffic's released. So it would be very, very minimal impact. And fortunately for us, Revelstoke's kind of used to this a little bit. So hopefully being able to get everybody on board shouldn't be too difficult.
Councilor Nunker?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm not sure, because this isn't even really a motion, it's just a delegation, so I'm sure motions would come further, but just as I saw our staff sergeant sitting here, I figured I would ask a question through the chair, if I may. Your Worship, I'm very supportive of the industry and such, but also have to respect that we have a responsibility to take care of the taxpayers and the RCMP. So am I understanding correctly, you're requesting that RCMP members would be there every day that you're filming all day then?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the question through the chair then for the staff sergeant. Because I know we've been discussing through our budget and you're already running tight as it is. With those members then that would be requested, most likely I would be over and above and thus most likely brought in on overtime, or do you have the capacity to supply those officers to be at the film shoot for all these days?
Your Worship, as we came to council with this operating budget asking for an additional up to 3 officers and were declined any, I cannot see how this allows us any capacity. We are fully supportive of the film industry and all economic development in Revelstoke. However, anything that was done in terms of requesting RCMP officers would have to be done on overtime because we are currently only meeting our needs at this time with the officers we have. So anything beyond that would have to be identified as an overtime cost.
Great, thank you, I appreciate your input. Any further?
Yeah, Your Worship, so if I may, I just had a question then, understanding the RCMP and that the taxpayers would be most likely paying for that. In regards to the fire department and the BC ambulance, would that be paid for, would that have to be discussion with the province, Your Worship, or is that through the city?
So I think this is where the film commissioner and Ms. Braun would have those conversations and work with those groups directly to see how they would be billed.
If I may hopefully shed a little bit of light here on this. What it is currently we are looking to consult with the various stakeholders, ambulance, police, firefighters. If they feel or they deem necessary their presence during the filming or the shooting of this, then we will begin to budget for that and possibly work with the city if need be to see how we can all help to make this work out. Generally, we consult with the police to let them know what we're doing, but they're not always necessary to be on set during filming. Fire departments can be replaced by first aid, and that can be a local hire or a private hire by all means. But again, we want to consult with them to let them know what we're doing. Because what we're involving here is a motorcycle with a tread on the back, one that's going to be jumping and flipping and climbing walls, so to say. This is a stunt film. So we want everybody to be involved. And if they want to have their input into it, by all means, we're ready to listen to it. So really what this is not so much an ask as it is more so a consulting with And should it be deemed necessary, then at that point, we'll look back at the budget or possibly for some assistance where need be.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Elliott?
The film crews, you would come in with your own safety network, and your safety plan, and your own crew of people to guard the doors, your own
Sure.
film crew,
Yep.
right? That's standard. And I think what you're looking for is, do we like the idea? Would it showcase Revelstoke? Is it build our reputation? Ultimately, that's what you're looking for. And I think Ingrid and the film, David, you guys will talk. Police would be involved if needed. The ambulance guys, again, I would expect you have a safety team and a first aid attendant associated with your crew. And that's standard practice typically. So I think we have going too deep into the details. It isn't
Right.
wrong thing. It's not
Yeah,
exactly
what we're doing is we're trying to bring, because of the scope of this project and the size of it and the amount of streets that they want to be able to use and lock up over the course of the 10 days, this isn't your average film, if you will, in that we can just come in, fill out a permit application, hopefully get approved for it, and then great, we've got that street, if you will. This is larger, and as well, these gentlemen are looking to partner with some of the stakeholders within the city of Revelstoke. And in exchange, they're going to showcase Revelstoke. So this is a little bit bigger picture than your average Hallmark film, if you will. They want to be engaging with Revelstoke. They want to have assistance, but as well, they're going to give something back. And I think there's a great opportunity here for us to capitalize on what they're offering.
So you get conversation with the snowmobile club, conversation with tourism Revelstoke, and those things will happen and fund whatever is necessary to make it happen.
You're on the right track, that's it.
Councillor Juncker, then Councillor Lynn.
Your Worship, thanks. Yeah, just for Councillor Elliott, the only reason why I'm asking the questions is because it's actually in the PowerPoint where they're talking about no fees and permits being levied by the city, so question then through the chair for Ms. Braun then, essentially this is just put on here as a delegation, then will we see motions in the future then if anything was decided upon and you would come back to council then?
To the chair, that's right.
Okay, thanks, Worship.
Ms. Wu?
Your worship, also later on in our agenda, you'll notice that there is a film policy coming from economic development that outlines and captures a lot of your questions.
Right.
Councillor Lynn?
Is there any other communities being featured in this film, or is it just in Revelstoke?
It's going to be strictly Revelstoke.
Cool. And also, do you think if there were fees associated with this or costs, that MRDT funds and marketing would be applicable in this case?
They would be part of what Ingrid.
Yeah, but is that where the
Mr.
funding
Chabot will
likely comes from?
answer your question.
Your Worship, if we want to use public funds to support what's essentially a for-profit venture, we'd have to do a partnering agreement, which would require notice to the community, would take some months to prepare and agree to. Certainly the municipal service we'd be receiving would be the rights to use the footage to promote our community.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way in which you can provide funding support to for-profit ventures.
Thank you. I think, gentlemen, we're supportive of having you come to Revelstoke. I want you to be aware of that. We encourage you to work with Ms. Braun and the other stakeholders so that we can make sure that this comes to pass and that you get what you need and the city has what they need covered. And Ms. Braun will be able to help you with all of those things. So thank you for your time and for your delegation.
What kind of stuff are you talking about?
What do you want to see?
Yeah.
I mean, how big? What are we talking about?
That's up to the athlete, really.
Yeah.
But we have a kind of a little bit of a rough idea of what he wants to do, like some wall rides, some jumps over some of the main intersections, some rhythm sections over cars, like not actually landing on the cars, but over the cars.
Our cars.
Our cars, not anyone else's cars. Yeah, that kind of stuff. And also there's going to be a bit of riding up in the hill, because the whole idea behind this video is he's going to be up in the mountains with his friends, and his friends are going to load up and say, well, are you coming? You go, no, I'm going to meet you at home. And then it's his journey home. That's why it's called The Way Home. Yeah.
So, Councillor Elliott, would you like to be a stunt double?
I mean, just as a general sense of April is sort of a wind down time for our community too, so there's a good time for it.
That's a good time. Councillor Cross.
Yeah, I just want to say, gentlemen, I'm one of the most supportive people of the film industry coming to town. I've been to a couple of meetings about this. I've always been very supportive. I have a lot of concern about this one. I have a lot of concern about what your idea is and what it would do. And I personally, I'm just going to say, if it came to council for approval, I'm not sure I could support it. Just want to be honest about that, because I think it's highly invasive. I'm not sure, speaking for myself as a councillor, I'm not sure it's exactly the image we want Revelstoke to be portrayed in. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. I'd just rather be honest. Your presentation was great. I fully support the movie industry. Not sure I could support this idea, personally.
Councilor.
I think the opposite. I think it's right in line with Revelstoke, especially since we've got a whole, hardcore mountain bike skiing sort of thing going on. I think it fits right in, and I support it.
On that note, just to highlight to this, and we didn't cover it off here, but the demographic that this is focusing on, right, is a very large demographic, very large. And it fits into the Revelstoke, hence Revelstoke being certainly what, part of the factor for choosing to be here, right? The age group, of course, the activity, the sport that it is, and the outdoor sports that it is, right? So Revelstoke is certainly a great base for this, which was the original attraction for these gentlemen. So the exposure that this has potential for, reaching into the tens of millions, is untold at the other side, right? What it can turn into, the amount of phone calls that may flood into tourism, may fall into booking, into the hills, and so on like this. So the potential of it's great. Can it be tightened up? Absolutely. But this is the first steps. And this is us just giving you a heads up, hey, this is what we're looking to do over the next while. Working with the stakeholders. This will be much tighter the next time we present this to you. Yeah. Absolutely.
Just a final thought. Yeah, again, if it was going to be a go, I'd like to see approval from the businesses downtown. I'd like to see if a majority are in favor, then great. And also the individual building owners obviously would have to sign an approval that they're okay with it, right? Obviously, we don't want to run on people's property. And I'm assuming your liability insurance is going to be substantial in case the ride goes south and goes through somebody's window.
Yep.
Gentlemen, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate you coming here. We have lots of snow bike, just a moment. We have lots of snow bike owners here in the community, and I think it's a positive thing going forward. I appreciate you coming and doing the delegation, and know that I personally am behind you on it, but also I understand the concerns of our councillors in the community. So thank you again. Councillor Elliott would like to have one last word.
I think you could talk to Cathy English about the history of the snowmobile club in our town, because she's probably got a lot of photos and heritage things that might fit into your show.
Great. Thanks again, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7C. Excuse me, another delegation. Jesse Batty is here with Interior Health. Jesse, if you'd like to move to the podium, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jesse Batty. I'm one of the specialist drinking water officers with Interior Health. And specifically, I do regulate the city of Revelstoke and issue the operating permit from Interior Health for potable water use in the water treatment plant. Yeah, it's good. Mike's got more to do that than me. So just a little bit of background on kind of the provincial oversight here. So the Ministry of Health is ultimately responsible for the legislation, which is the Drinking Water Protection Act and regulation. Those are the two pieces of regulation that we specifically will have mandate over, focusing strictly on the quality of water, not the quantity of water, but certain issues can kind of intertwine the two things. So I'm a delegated officer from the medical health officers of the province and specifically from Interior Health. So the doctors are essentially the bosses and the ultimate drinking water officers. So just a little bit of background on where Interior Health is at. Our medical health officers are pretty progressive on large water systems and what they want to see out of the communities and how important they hold water and drinking water to be. Last year was the first time we actually put together a medical health officer report on drinking water, which did strictly focus on large water systems. And kind of as a summary, one of the biggest things that came out of that was by 2025, all large water systems must provide potable water compliant with the treatment objectives set out by the Ministry of Health. So I'm happy to say that we're already there here. So the membrane plant does take care of that. Some of the others in the Okanagan and the Kootenay area will be working with strategically to make sure get there as well. So just going into a little bit more focus, and I know it'd be real fun to sit here and kind of read the Drinking Water Protection Act and legislation, but I thought I'd just highlight in on some of the important elements that we focus on here. So the way we've done business with the larger municipalities and the larger systems is that we do issue standard conditions on operating permit, which we have the right to do through the Drinking Water Protection Act. And so currently, Revelstoke has 7, and I'm actually just in the middle of updating these a little bit with the Director of Engineering and the utility staff, so I thank them for all their work, because it is a cumbersome task to go ahead and do that. But I just thought I'd talk about kind of the 7 main items, and one of them is cross-connection control, which I think is a highlight for you guys as you guys are thinking of undertaking that endeavor as so just to go through, and stop me at any time if you have any questions, feel free. So the first condition on permit is to provide a source water protection plan for each water source that you have. This one is actually in compliance already. We're kind of in a monitoring phase, so most of these will have some sort of a status, objectives and kind of things that have changed or will change from ministry objectives. And then target dates, right? So at this point, that plan has been completed on both the source, the surface water source, and on the well also. So there's always a risk management plan that's kind of issued with that recommendation. So from time to time, staff and myself will kind of look at those and see where we're at, and if there's anything else we can do better. Basically, it's overall health of your watershed and wanting to know what's happening in your watershed. So talking to a lot of the stakeholders, industry, government agencies to make sure that the watershed itself is being taken care of. Okay. Second one is providing a certified operator to operate your system. So the way the systems are classified, they're actually classified on both treatment level and distribution level. So treatment being the water treatment plant, how complicated is it, how complex is it to run. So the Environmental Operations Certification Program is the body who comes in and works with utility staff to come in and say, hey, this is based on what the assessment here is you're a level either 1, 2, 3, or 4 being the most complex. The only 4 we have, I think, in IH right now is the City Kamloops. I think we've talked about some reclassification, but right now for treatment, you're sitting at a level 2, and you do have an operator at that level. Distribution, so that's the network, the PRV stations, the reservoirs, the distribution mains and pipes, and how complex that is. So that'll get a rating as well. So that's just something that we do monitor as well. Moving along, the third condition on permit is operating according to your water quality monitoring program. So there's all types of monitoring occurring from your water treatment plant level to the distribution system itself, and actually the water coming out of the taps. So the regulation's pretty strict on monitoring with regards to bacteriological monitoring. So they test weekly for E. coli, fecal coliforms, and another group of indicator bacteria we call total coliforms. That gives us the overall health of the distribution pipes, what's coming out of the treatment plant, and making sure the water's safe at your tap. Okay. Outside of that, there'll be some comprehensive testing being done that's a little bit more costly, the metals and other things like disinfection byproducts, your real-time monitoring systems picking up a lot of things like chlorine residual, that kind of thing, to make sure that things are working as they should be, and they'll alert the operators when they're not. So all of this is kind of encompassed into your water quality monitoring plan, so that's a pretty big part and pretty loaded condition on operating permit. So the next one is of a pretty good concern for you guys, is the operate according to your cross-connection control program. So right now you don't have one, but I understand that that's one of the ones that's been outlined for some time that should be taken on. So all of these conditions on permit and some of the things that I'm talking about, they all kind of play a part in what we call the multi-barrier approach to providing clean, safe tap drinking water. And that's an international kind of acronym and saying that you'll find anywhere in the world. So all of these barriers together will help get you to that point. So cross-connection control, it's basically protecting your water system against backflow of contaminants that industry, commercial entities, etc. might be using, so that making sure that there's no risk of those things coming back into your potable water system and affecting the health of the users, okay? So it's very important. It has been an outstanding condition on permit for some time, so you know, other things come in the way, like building water treatment plants and taking on other systems and that kind of thing. So we do work with local governments and communities to make sure that there's at least a plan to meet these objectives, and it seems like there is one now. So I'm very, very happy to hear that actually, and how well it's progressing. So just a little bit about that. I think you may have heard some about that. I'm not going to talk too much about the plan because that's being prepared by a consultant and with help from Mike. But basically what will happen is you form your bylaw first, and what that's going to mean to you in terms of oversight on the plan itself. And then contractors and the consultants with utility staff will also do an assessment of risk based on all the service connections that you have, which we call the ICI, so the industrial, commercial, and the institutional service connections, and what type of device they should have to make sure that the system is protected. Those devices are monitored and tested annually, so there'll be software that'll make sure that you guys can inventory that, because the only thing worse than not having a plan is a device that doesn't work, right? Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Is there any immediate questions on cross-connected control? Because I know that's kind of a hot topic right now.
Has there been an incident of cross-contamination here?
Here in Revelstoke? Well, it's funny because you wouldn't actually know if you don't have a testing device. So there potentially could be at times. So you can have negative pressure events. You can have pressure losses and stuff where things can happen in the system. But we have some confidence in operations, and we work with them pretty closely. So if we have a hunch or a probability, we'd be addressing those with such things like boil water advisories or other water quality advisories, public notification procedures that are all worked into the emergency response plan for the utility, okay? The next one, I'm not going to spend too much time on, but basically this is a very kind of loaded condition on operating permit. It's any long-term plans for source, treatment, distribution, and anything else that encompass the water system. So this is just one where we give the municipalities and utilities an opportunity to tell us about what else they would like to do, such as water master planning, asset management planning, risk and vulnerability analyses, which all of these things, one way, shape, or form, some of them have been done and some of them will be done in the future. Kind of gives you an idea of what you should be putting aside for capital costs, infrastructure replacement, operations, and where, you know, based on population development, et cetera, and what's happening with your water system specifically. Okay? Okay, and then I just touched briefly on it, but the number 6 here is reviewing and updating your emergency response plan annually. So that is a requirement of the Act. So essentially, there is an emergency response plan that utilities and the Director of Engineering have come up and worked with us on as well to approve, basically outlining any emergency that it could occur with your water system and how they would respond to that emergency. And what agencies, what stakeholders, and what need to be involved, and what the users need to know in terms of risk. Okay, so that's something that's updated annually. And then lastly is just reporting. So I get 2 types of reporting. One is monthly reporting, which is just a snapshot of what's happening from the month. Some sample results, as I got about 50 files, so it's hard for me to keep track. So the team here definitely keeps me in the loop of what's happening, any anomalies, and just overall data given to me, okay? And then the more comprehensive annual report, which is a requirement of the Act, which is actually made more for the users. So, you know, what's happening with your water system, what did we monitor, what did we find, how are we spending our money, what's in store for the water system next. So those are some of the major conditions on permit. And overall, I'm actually pleased to say that it's been a pleasure to work with Revelstoke, and we're getting to be exactly where we want to be with all these different conditions on permit, and open it up to any questions you may have.
Jesse, I just want to state we appreciate you coming and doing a presentation and working with our utilities people. We're confident in their abilities. I've been here a long time, so I remember when we had problems with beaver fever and that sort of thing, and the angst that was in the community. Even though we didn't want you to come and do anything to our water, we definitely knew that something had to be done. So, you know, now that we have the water plant and how it's operating, pretty pleased with what's going on, and then taking on the Getty water and still appreciating the fact that we're able to provide clean water now for those residents as well is a great opportunity for this community, but we appreciate you keeping us in check and monitoring this. Councilors, do you have any questions?
In terms of the quality of the water, our base water supply, is it, how is it, what level are we at?
It rates to be fully in compliance with any of the objectives, and it's excellent. So the province has basically put out some barriers and percentages on log removals of certain pathogens that you need. So viruses being a 99.99% removal. The beaver fever, so Giardia, Cryptosporidium, those types of protozoa where we want a 3-log or 99.99% removal. So your plant's doing it. With the mixture of the chlorine and the membrane plant, you're doing exactly that and potentially even more, but that's the baseline minimum. So water quality and safety is great for the water sources here.
And the water source itself, is it a reasonably quality? We don't have to filter it so much. It's a good quality, good supply, I guess.
Yeah, so there's always a source assessment done on the source, so there's nothing that's kind of standing out where there's a risk to the source that the plant won't take care of. So it's an open source. It's a surface water source, more vulnerable to environmental contamination, animals, and just nature and climate change, right? But the plant and the level of treatment is built for that. Okay, and the well source has also been looked at as well, so there's always assessments and hydrogeological investigations, et cetera, done to make sure that we're treating that as we should and treating it with the right type of disinfection, et cetera. Okay. The only other thing I'll mention is that we do make it a priority, and I specifically do, to write letter of support for you guys for any grant applications that go forward. So as you guys do move forward, I definitely stand up with you and even make those phone calls to Victoria when I can. And we've been successful so far, and I hope to see that continue.
Great, thanks, Cathy. We're appreciative again of you coming. We know we've got good water because everybody's drinking it. They're appreciating it. We got award-winning beer and vodka, so we know that we've got the base for those things. So we're very happy.
My top 3 drinks, there you go.
Awesome. Thanks again for the time.
That's good water. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 10. And Councilor Juncker, there's a motion on the floor that you would like to move forward.
Yeah, Your Worship. So this was the notice of motion from last council meeting. So this is a motion that a report come to council by May 28, 2019 with a recommendation on updating the current City of Revelstoke Development Cost Charges Bylaw number 1781, including an outline for the public engagement process.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councilor Ryan. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Juncker.
Yeah, Your Worship, seeing as I brought this one, I'll just talk about it a bit. So, as we all know, this was quite a heated debate that went on in the last council that you sat on, Your Worship, and I think it's we need to deal with this sooner than later. We have a lot of developments coming forward, and with brief conversations that I've had with Mr. Thomas and in my grocery store, just figuring out, at what time the DCCs are paid and how they're grandfathered in. I just think it's, we definitely need to take a look at this sooner than later. I understand that you did have the, you wanted to let the community time to heal, but I think, we have had that, and the beginning now to get this, the previous report from McElhaney Consulting brought back to this council so we can work together with the director and other staff that are required to see this fit so that our community, our current taxpayers, and I just use the example that the previous mayor, Mayor McKee, had used for the water line. I think it's almost $1 million is being paid from taxpayer funding because there wasn't an updated DCC bylaw. I just don't think that the current residents should have to pay any more for development where they could be paying more. And so that's why I would like our council to begin this process. I know that there is money allocated in the budget. That's why I put this after the budget process, and I don't think, my personal opinion is that we'll need that much money, as I think the report was actually pretty good. And just from what I've heard from people in this town over their concerns with the last bylaw, it wasn't so much about the cost, but rather just how the communication played out. And I think this council is eager to get to work, and I think it would be good for us to work on.
Okay, so having noted that, I'm going to get Mr. Thomas to weigh in it here in a moment, but I made comment before, we have money put aside for the OCP, and then some money put aside to deal with some of our outdated zoning. And then I was going to look at DCCs at that point, because that would all kind of blend in together as a unit. And there's a positive point with that, because sitting on the previous council where I listened for 8 months as to what the community were saying, and they were saying, deal with the OCP, get that done, deal with some of the zoning, and then we'll look at DCCs. And of course, the communication in all of that was, there was a backlash from the community in dealing with the DCCs. And that's why I mentioned about healing. I can assure you there'll be a backlash again if we were to go back to it right now. However, having said that, I think it's prudent for us to have this discussion, so I applaud you on bringing that forward at this point in time. But I've asked Mr. Thomas just to weigh in and actually deal with what we're talking about, what you're going to see with a report, and so that you don't get optimistic that all of a sudden we're going to kick in DCCs into place and we're going to get millions of dollars coming in, because it's not that sort of panacea. But Mr. Thomas, if you wouldn't mind just weighing in a bit, please.
Your Worship, this motion is something that we can definitely achieve as staff. So we can write a report outlining detailing how we will go about doing a DCC bylaw review. We have, so we can do that by the end of May. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to pull together what's effectively a project plan for the project. I think we can definitely meet that. So as far as that goes, I think what I can't tell you today is what that's actually going to look like. And I think one part of this motion is regarding the communication plan, which I'd say we would probably defer to the consultant to some degree on the communication plan, and that obviously depends on staff, resources and availability, but we would probably be looking to a consultant that's engaged to do the DCC project to also be very involved in how they plan to communicate out to the various stakeholders. So I'm not sure that we would be adding that specific piece into this report that would be coming back. In terms of what the Mayor's mentioned with the official community plan, the DCC bylaw hasn't been looked at in great detail since about 2005-06. It was updated in 2008. 2009, around then, the city did the OCP. And since then we've done, Parks, Rec, Culture Master Plan, Trails Master Plan. We've done a draft transportation plan, community energy emissions plan. We did the integrated community sustainability plan. All these things can feed into a new OCP and new DCC bylaw. One of the things that we did with the last DCC bylaw, and it was contentious, was a significant reduction in the assumed growth rate. This was highly contentious because people are saying, but we're growing at a faster than ever before rate. However, and I think this is definitely part of the problem with pushing it forward soon, is that I think the OCP process will actually go into a much greater detail in looking at community growth and those projections. And so the DCC bylaw going before the OCP, so clearly last year we weren't ready to do the OCP for various reasons. This year with the with the staffing in the planning department and funding for the OCP, I would at least want to get that part of the OCP out of the way before we tackle DCCs, because I feel like otherwise we're sort of back to square one with the DCCs if there's a different outcome from the OCP process, particularly with the population growth. So on that one item alone, I'm a little concerned that the OCP process, which has significant community engagement, it may come to the same conclusion, but the benefit of going through the OCP process to come to that conclusion is that it's sort of this separate process that actually, even if it came to the same conclusion, it would show more of a community support and engagement in it. Some other pieces that I've been thinking about is the budget on this. So we have $60,000 allocated in the budget for 2019. One of my concerns is looking at the scope of the project. That $60,000 really is to take the existing report and use all of that base information and bring it forward again, let's communicate it out. Let's make sure that we're happy as staff, consultant, council team to present that information to the community. That will require quite a bit of background information for council. So I think that is about a $60,000 project. If we are going to try and add in anything new into it or make any sort of wholesale changes to it, I think that's really going to be quite a lot more money than that $60,000. So that this is where the project plan, I think, is really important. It is a good first step because it lets council have a look at what we're thinking of doing and giving some feedback back to staff before we would go out and procure a consultant for this work.
Councillor Yonker.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Thomas. Just a couple comments and questions then, Your Worship. Just in regards to the OCP update that's in the budget, I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I read that it was planned for over this current year and into next year.
It may take 2 or 3 years to complete in stages because it's going to be almost a living document. So
right.
By the time we're 3 years into our term, we should have it complete where it'll be ready to be started again on a minor process. So it continues on. But to get to where we're doing here, my hope was this year we could at least get some consensus with a consultant as to where we should be at in dealing with some engagement with the community as to where we should be going and how we're going, and then that we can weigh in with some of these other items that we need to deal with down the road. And I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying. I'm saying that we need to do that, but how soon will be kind of dependent on having a consultant look at that and say, this is where, coming back to us, this is where we think the plan should go and how it should work. And I think then we'll have a better idea of where we go from here. I don't know if that answers your question or if Mr. Chabot or Mr. Thomas could weigh in a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, Your Worship. I understand where you're going, but to that, and I totally respect it. But last year, the previous council and with the support of city staff, were saying, crying, we need money, we need to increase the DCC fees, we need to do it now, we should have done it a long time ago. And I understand what you're saying, but now I'm trying to understand that how do we go now to the taxpayer when this new council came in, and I think most councils said, it's one of the top things that we need to work on, and now we could possibly be going back to the taxpayer and saying, well, we might have to wait a couple of years now when there's lots of development coming in, depending on how long the OCB process update takes, and with the consultant, when eventually Mr. Thomas, makes that decision, because it would at least sound like it most likely wouldn't be this year then. So,
I'm not positive on that, so I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes.
Right.
So, Councillor Charlotte wants to weigh in. Can I ask her to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing then. With the consulting fees that are budgeted for this, specifically that are in that budget line right now for the DCC through the chair, then is that something that the council needs to look at, Mr. Thomas, that possibly increasing, or would that be a reserve thing? Like, say further this year, you go, we need more. I'm just understanding how that works.
So we can ask Mr. Thomas, and then Ms. McKay may want to weigh in as well.
Your Worship, I'd suggest keeping it as it is at the moment, and I've got my thoughts on what the scope of that project should look like. If council decides that they want to do something else, I think that can be that conversation at that time, and then obviously there can be a budget amendment. If we believe that more funds are required, that can even happen at the point of entering into a contract with the selected consultant. So obviously we wouldn't want to sign that contract without council having approved the budget amendment if it exceeded $60,000.
Right, and sorry, I just wanted to finish then, Your Worship. So then, just to clarify again, this isn't asking for the bylaw to be wrapped. I'm just asking for, like Mr. Thomas indicated, the plan to come back that he would like to see. And I think it would be good for our council to see that plan, and then once we see it, we can work with Mr. Thomas and his staff to indicate if we would like to change that or how we, but I think this is just, like I brought forward here, seeing the plan to get Mr. Thomas, which he had indicated is plenty of time to just see his plan on.
Exactly, and I appreciate that. I wanted you to know how the plan may lay out after the fact that you get the plan, what the long-term is going to be. So that's why I'm bringing that. Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to work. I think the whole council is, because we did all run on the idea of getting the DCCs, getting the OCP. The more I hear about the details of how this works, especially talking about the initial chapter, as you say, of the OCP process, looking at growth. What are we actually expecting? Because I know we've been through a roller coaster ride over the last 10 years of there's going to be growth. Oh wait, no, there isn't. There is, I'll believe it when I see it. And now we're sitting in this spot. So to be able to go through that chapter first, I think would be very healthy. With the timeline on this, and the way you're saying, Your Worship, about bringing the OCP forward very soon, would it be realistic to expect part of this report to include that OCP process? What do those chapters look like? Are we at a point that we could bring that forward as well so that we could look at how it all jives together?
Mr. Chabot, any comment on that?
Your Worship, the part I struggle with, because I'm siding with you, in a perfect world, the OCP would be updated first. Right. The DCC bylaw would then follow the growth projections and land use patterns intoned in that document. I think a fundamental part of the OCP is the community's statement of its vision and its mission and where it sees itself in the future. And that's going to define what council should be prepared to approve in terms of community growth and development, and has implications for infrastructure demand. And so I'm having trouble trying to put one before the other or interlink the two. I don't want one to impair the ability of the other to do as good a job as it can. I think making best use of all the effort that was put into the OCP update last year, there was a lot of time and energy of staff, consultant, of council, of the community, and a lot of money spent on researching what is a fairly complex engineering financial process. And I don't think we need deviate very far from that. I think I take Mr. Thomas's advice that if you want to look at additional elements, some of the more creative use of DCCs that imply different things for a community, some of the energy efficiency things, some of the DCCs for employee housing in a resort region, we should have those conversations. I think we shouldn't kid ourselves as to how effective they may or may not have been in other communities, though, and how widespread their use is. I think that we've got some core infrastructure issues need to be addressed, and I, like the rest of council, look forward to getting on with it. Horribly disappointed that we didn't make some progress towards collecting more appropriate fees from new growth and development in this community to offset the capital costs they impose.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Elliott?
If there's any message that needs to go out to the public, it's that we are collecting some money from DCCs for growth and development. We are collecting a big portion. It's just a matter of whether it's enough for what we need for the future.
Yeah.
And I say, well, that future is dependent on what we get for population, where we want to go as a vision. All those things need to come into play. So do we want to be the highest DCC city in BC? I don't know. Do we want to be the lowest? We want to, right now we're right in the middle. So the decision is we have to say where we want to be. And I think that OCP direction has to come first, and I think DCCs will follow.
So I'll have some conversation with staff as to how we move forward with OCP and what are the timelines and how we do that. And then we're going to have that conversation around this table in the public to kind of have a better idea with that. We're going to see some reports come out in the near future. TELUS Insights report, I believe, will be publicized tomorrow, at least to some degree, or later this week. You know, we're wanting to see those things, and I'm pushing to see those things, but I guess I better back off and let them do their thing and let it come to fruition as to the way it is, and that'll kind of give us a little bit better clarity when it comes to population and growth and what we've seen, that sort of thing. And then we can basically have this conversation around the table and say, you know what, this is where we need to go and how we do it and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, bringing this forward, asking for the report is a prudent thing to do. So let's ask for that. Councillor Ryan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I'm probably just oversimplifying it, but I think waiting for numbers about growth and stuff like that seems strange because it's obvious to everybody that there's a ton of growth, and I think it's a shame we can't sort of capitalize on that now while it's happening. And then, you know, get that OCP updated, because you mentioned it's a live document, won't really be completed for 3 years, and then at that point, you know, you can reassess, and obviously we don't want to leave our DCCs for 10 years like we did the last time, so then by the time the OCP's done that in 3 years, then maybe a couple of years down the road, you look at DCCs again, you know? I don't know.
So we may be dealing with I'm anticipating we're going to deal with the DCCs before we're complete on everything. Right? So I want you to be aware of that. But I actually want the reports to come so we see where we're going with that.
Is there a cost associated with that report?
Well, it's going to be an internal report with staff time.
Okay, yeah.
So there's going to be staff time. And the same thing with the TELUS Insight. So within a couple of weeks, probably by our next council meeting, we're going to have a little bit more information as to where we're at with what the amount of people that are here, even though we have a pretty good idea. But we'll look at some of these reports. There's a benefit to actually looking at the reports rather than short-circuiting and saying, hey, this is what we expect. So once we go through that sort of thing. So I know everybody's itching to get to work. I appreciate that. And I know different, it's just the way we're doing it will be concise. Councillor Brooks Hill, you have a question?
So I'm happy to support this motion and have a report back by the end of May. I know we have yet to approve the budget, which includes the OCP update, but would by the end of May be an appropriate time to have an idea of when we're going to be beginning that OCP update?
I certainly think so. I certainly think so. Councillor Cross.
Yeah, I think the motion is appropriate. I just would kind of echo what other councillors have said, particularly Councillor Ryan's comments around timing. You know, there's an old expression in business, you can have extinction by instinct or paralysis by analysis. I'm not sure we need perfect OCP information to move forward with DCC choices, because we can always tweak them later, especially if we go in on a certain risk management level. So I would encourage us, you know, I'm looking forward to that report. I would like to see it dealt with as soon as possible on the DCC side, even if the OCP later indicates we need to tweak it some more.
Sure.
As I understand the DCC process, if we look at it every year, every 2 years, we don't run into the massive costs we ran into by ignoring it for a decade.
Yeah, got a point. Mr. Thomas?
Yes and no. To answer your sort of comment about changing certain things, regardless of whether we see it as a small thing, may actually be a major update in the province's eyes. So that's why I think it's really important that there is acceptance by council of the growth numbers. Because from my perspective, that's actually a major piece. You can't just go and tweak that every year. Because that number actually flows through every part of every spreadsheet involved in the whole DCC project. If you overestimate growth, you're not collecting enough money. If you underestimate growth, your costs per development application, usually you don't actually drop projects off the list because there's less growth. You still need those projects to be done. So your cost per project goes way up for the development. So underestimating it's bad, overestimating it's bad. There is this, sort of, just that Goldilocks, just right, sort of place in there that has to, in my mind, it has to be a realistic growth rate. The last growth rate that we had in the DCC bylaw was never met. So back in 2006, they assumed that we were going to grow at this amount, and it was never met. So we need to do better best intentions that it's going to get updated every year. It may not. This may be the bylaw for the next 10 years. And so I don't want to go into the project assuming an outcome that, you know, I'm sure back then the best intention was that it's going to be looked at, you know, every couple of years or whatever. And it never got updated. So I think we do have to be very careful about the numbers that we put in the bylaw, because that is the fundamental first piece of the project.
Councillor Cross and Councillor Elliott.
I would appreciate in the report on the motion if it could be listed. So what are the sources of input to calculate the growth projection? What are those sources of data or input, right? Would be a good list to have, because at the end of the day, it's a guesstimate, all said and done, right? In 06, 08 hadn't happened. In 08 was a heck of a crash.
And so with that, there'll be several committee of the whole meetings so that everybody gets a pretty good idea of how the DCCs work, what projects are for DCCs, and exactly how do we collect it. And then so that everybody around the table really understands what we're doing before we get to the bylaw portion. Councillor Elliott, you had a question.
I think Mike touched on finding the number, and that number applies to growth, economic development, all the way along. That's a key. If we're not getting the number, economic development would be, you know, say, what can we do to make that happen? We should be taking the reins, and that's what the OCP gives us. We said, okay, we're not getting there, let's take the steps to get there. And build a tourism thing, or build something that'll draw to get the numbers. We have a plan, and finding the number where we're at right now and what we want to go to is an essential step.
Any further discussion on this motion that's on the table? So I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're going to move on to new business. Councillor Juncker, you wanted to have a verbal discussion regarding council meeting times. You want to bring up from your perspective?
Yeah, Your Worship, sorry, I was talking to Ms. Lou earlier, didn't even realize this was going on here today, sorry. I know just through a couple chats that we've had and whatnot, and I've heard from a lot of people in the public that the live streaming is available, but they wish to attend. But again, you know, after our last council meeting, getting home at 9 o'clock at night, I went, well, if we were to make it later, then it could be going possibly to 11 p.m. at night, so varying factors. I don't know, I was just throwing out a thought for discussion that maybe maybe once every couple months we look at moving one of the council meetings to a later time. Or I know that there is, I was reading the community charter about giving proper notification of meeting times and whatnot, but I just wanted to have the discussion and see what everybody thought. If the time was fine, then I'm totally, but seeing as we need to have the discussion at the table, that's why I asked to be brought forward.
So any other councillors prepared to want to discuss this at all? Councillor Cross?
Yeah, I completely understand the concern around people being able to attend, but since they are all on video, I'm not sure we need to change the time. And I get very concerned about inconsistencies. So I could support a change in time that's permanent. I'm not sure I could support an erratic time frame, because I think that confuses people more than anything. Just my thought on it. I'm really happy that we have the video now. I think that's been a great thing. I know of a lot of citizens who watch the video. I think they get the popcorn out, they have a good time. I like to think they're having a good time.
Yeah, for sure. So at your inaugural, you approved a meeting time. It goes out to the public, it's on all the websites, it's listed on our notice board. Any changes, we need advance notification. I just wanted to reassure everybody that when we do have things like public hearings that are controversial or are attracting a lot of support or not support, and a lot of people do want to attend, we will hold them at the rec center in the evening. So that is something to think about as well. I support Councillor Cross with the consistency of keeping them at the same time.
Mr. Chabot, then Councillor Sherwood.
Your Worship, just further, Ms. Lowe speaks of special meetings and one-offs. The time, date, and place of meetings is specified in Council's procedures bylaw, and councils will adjust it for a variety of reasons: for community attendance, ability to come out and participate. I, like some on council, don't believe that if people have access to it on their own time, in their own homes, that they'd necessarily come out if we changed the time. But I've seen a lot of councils composed of working individuals, and it was hard for them to make time for the small stipend they get for serving their community out of their workday, and they chose to meet in the evenings because that worked better for those council members. And so it's entirely a decision of council when it meets, and there's a variety of factors to be considered. We're happy to do it whenever.
Thank you.
Saturday mornings.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I do also appreciate the fact that the video is a lot healthier of quality now, moving forward. So it does make it more practical for that purpose. On the other hand, for things like the public meeting on the budget being at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, those are the kinds of meetings that I would like to entertain the discussion around moving into the evening. Partly just in the optics of making it more available, makes it easier for people to attend in person for information like budget information. I know I had a hard time consuming it all, and I think it would be easier in person for the average public. Even if we only get a couple more coming, that's the kind of behavior we want to encourage.
So Ms. Lowe, then Mr. Sherwood.
So Your Worship, the timeline for the financial plan consultation period is actually on your report later on. If you choose to amend the date and time, or the time and place of the meeting, we could hold it somewhere else if the rec center is available.
Right. And it's not so much the place. I don't expect to have a huge presentation.
Traditionally, we don't have very
But the timing would be valuable to have, I think, moving for that particular one.
Mr. Chabot.
Your Worship, I'd be thrilled if we had a standing room only crowd for a budget consultation meeting. If we got a couple more people to it, it would probably be a 200% increase in historical attendance. We've had these meetings a lot of times, and it's staff and council discussing the budget amongst themselves, and
that's fine.
people, you could decide that, geez, the community's satisfied with what council has determined to be in the budget and the information they've provided, or they put their faith in their elected folks, they don't feel they need to be here, or they're apathetic, or any variety of things.
So just before I get back to you, Councillor Young, I just want to ask if there's any other councillors that want to weigh in on the meeting time as we have it in the discussion here. Are you comfortable with the time, or would you like to weigh in at all before I go back to Councillor Juncker? No further comment from any of you? Okay, Councillor Juncker.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just to Councillor Shoet's point, actually, that's a really great point that I didn't even really think of. So maybe specialty meetings like that, we could look at changing time or date. And the only other thing that I was going to say that I'm trying to remember desperately now. In regards to, just because the budget has been mentioned in the budget process and such, and I've been putting on social media because people have been asking about that. Just to clarify, because it's kind of a general discussion right now, they're to email that finance if they can't attend that meeting. They're to email that finance
or budget
at email, correct? And then are those all going to be presented to council at that meeting then?
No, it'll be included when we bring back.
Oh, but they get those comments get presented. Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to the motion on the table. I personally am comfortable,
There's no motion.
or not the motion, the information. Anyway, I'm comfortable with the meeting time at 3 o'clock. I do agree with some of you that, if a special meeting, if you want to alter that time for later in the day, anticipating the throngs of public to come and enjoy our discussion on the budget, I would love to see that. If we need to book a hotel or something to get that, I'm being facetious now, but I would love to see the community come out to these sorts of things. And if we need to alter that, or you want to alter that as we get further along in the package, by all means. So Councillor Ellis.
It's not on a specialty meeting. In the budget case, I find it very disjointed to go 1 week, 2 weeks later, every other, we need the whole. To me, it would make more sense if you pick a week to nail the budget. You get a week-long evening session. You can address all the issues, and it's a continuous flow of information. If you're considering that, changing the meeting session, if you're going to address the budget, do it all in one go and get it out of the way.
Well, I think there's some positive reasons for giving a breathing room, because I'm sure that some of you are getting input back from the community as we deal with things as we go along, and that may change your thought process, or it may give you a chance to breathe on things. I'm looking at that, and I look at the timeline for staff and then for all of you around the council table. I mean, do you have the capacity to bulldoze through for a week straight to get to that point? I think in most cases, no. So I'll just leave that conversation. So we're gonna stop here. Councillor Juncker, you were indicating you needed to leave earlier, so
Yeah.
if you're comfortable carrying on, I'm okay with you being here. But
No, your worship, thanks, I appreciate it. I was just gonna say I'm totally fine with that, and Councillor Schwartz's point, I won't be here later to discuss that, but if I was here, I would support the meeting time. Just a question, if I may, your worship, for yourself, because it's in general business. The conversation that we had asked about, for you asking a question to Ms. McCabe, can we discuss that right now or no?
sure. I don't know whether we can go there. It was actually dealing with
I just want to talk about the budget.
the budget and the policing on the budget and the potential for no increase in taxes if we were to go that route, sort of thing.
I think we should deal with that at a later.
Okay, that's totally
Okay,
fine.
all right, good. Okay, that's fine, good. Councilor Burks-Hill, you had a question?
The whole idea with the meeting times, I know personally during my busy season, sort of May through August, later would work better for me. But I don't really see that my one interest being like, oh, if we did it at 4:30, it would be more convenient for me, superseding. But as a future discussion with, in a few years with making council positions more accessible to a wider public of people who have jobs, I think that having basically coming back and revisiting this issue with the idea of informing the public that, you know what, if you wanted to run for council, and there is the potential to shift the meetings, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can discuss it. Good. Yeah. We can have that discussion every January, or because we're sitting around, and look at that and say, hey, what do we want to do, or do we want to adjust some of the meetings as we go forward for the year? We're going to have that conversation and just see what goes for you. I don't want to intrude, putting it off till 4:30 if it's not going to be hardship for you to come. But if it's about accessing public to the meeting so that they can see, then I think those are the parameters with which we should look at times and whatnot. So I'm going to end this discussion on this, if you're okay with that, and we'll carry it on further. All right. Good. So we're going to go into staff reports. Mr. Sturgeon, you have a presentation on development permit for the NW. So we'll just get you all set up here. I think Councillor Cross will be back in a moment. Yeah. Councillor Burks-Hill?
Can we have a 5-minute recess?
Sure. Might as well. Yeah, let's take a 5-minute bio recess and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Get it over with. Get it over with. Most people can't. Sorry, I might as well.
As long as we got, yeah, I gotta go back to work.
Right? Like if you have to, but
But like, I would have to give advance warning,
Yeah, let me know.
ideally.
It's nice you let corporate admin know if you're unable to make
Yeah,
a meeting,
actually,
because
would
if
be-
we're not gonna reach quorum, let's not
Okay.
drag other people out here for no reason.
Yeah.
It's really important for Dawn to know.
Look at the agenda, and if I know you're in conflict with something and we lose quorum, we lose our meeting.
You have the podium, please.
Thank you. We have a development permit for your consideration today at 1884 Transcanada Highway. This is the site of an existing A&W restaurant. See there, you've got the highway as you come across the bridge. It's on your right-hand side. And it's in the highway commercial OCP designation and the C4 zone, which is also highway commercial. What it is here is a new building that's being put in exactly the same spot as the old building. There's the old and there's the new on the left. Some new signage all around and new design features to incorporate the A&W's revised corporate image since the old building was constructed, and new branding that goes along with that, which will align with a lot of the other locations you see throughout the province. This is in the Scenic Corridor Development Permit Area D, which is established for the purposes of form and character. And our guidelines in this area are to present a high-quality image to residents and tourists coming through town, to minimize impacts from development on the neighboring properties, to optimize site layout, parking and access and circulation and pedestrian uses, to include landscaping and screening on the site, and to make sure the garbage facilities are enclosed. On the right-hand side is a map of the development permit areas, so you can see the Scenic Corridor area is in orange, and this also extends down Victoria Road. And then the yellow is our multifamily areas. The design elements that have been included into this are a little unique to this location. It's going to have a full wood finish on the outside, which I have not seen on another location before. Some stone accents, cultured stone around the bottom, and then what's called alu panel, which is the white material at the front of the building. And then the characteristic, what we call a boomerang, wrapping around the building. New signage and branding. The slanted facade at the front is up here. It's kind of got a retro modern look. And then lots of glazing around the front of the restaurant, and then a patio out front here, which isn't shown on this rendering. That's what our site plan looks like. There's not too much change from what's existing. There's some new parking being added up here, and a new garbage enclosure going in back here. And then there's a couple of extra parking stalls added along this area here, and a handicap stall added here. They meet the minimum parking requirements of the bylaw. This also doubles as our landscaping plan, so you can see a lot of work's been put into the design around the back here, and a new retaining wall going in over here as well. The elevations that you have in your package showing a little bit more detail of what the materials will look like. And parking, I just went over that. We've also taken account of the drive-through queuing area here, and making sure that there's enough room for loading. There's no conflicts. I should note too, this is an in and out, so a one-way, going counterclockwise. Also, some variances are incorporated into this to accommodate the signage. So that's to account for the changeable copy sign. There's currently a changeable copy sign on the freestanding sign at the front of the property. We've been unable to locate any permit documents with that, given the date of the building going back to originally constructed in the 50s and renovated in the 70s. It could have been done under previous bylaws, or perhaps there wasn't a sign bylaw, I'm not quite certain. New canopy signage all the way around. Normally, the way our bylaw is worded, a canopy sign, when you have a projecting canopy out of a building, the sign goes right on the front of that, and there's a limitation on size. They're proposing to take what's effectively a fascia sign and place it on top of the canopy, so it's a little larger, so that's a variance. The freestanding sign is being replaced, slightly larger than what the bylaw permits, but a little larger than what the existing one is. And the drive-through order signage is not accommodated by the bylaw as well. So the signage is designed to integrate with the design of the building itself and be complementary. Pending Council's resolution process that we went through earlier tonight, where we'll follow up with you with another report at your next meeting. We did have some concerns with the design of the boomerang around the building. We've worked with the applicant on this over the last while. That band will be backlit. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this in some other municipalities as you've driven around. We were concerned that that might be contrary to the dark skies policy in the OCP, as I've discussed with you on other occasions, and that the glare and light intensity from that would further add to some of the conversations we've had surrounding that. We're also concerned about these supporting bands. They don't show up great in this photo, but every 5 feet is a band that holds in place that panel that constructs that boomerang. And we feel, as I've written there and in your and Michael's written in the report, that it creates a rather divided and broken look that we think would be better addressed by having a continuous facade on that. We've worked with the architect and with the applicant on it, and come to learn that they're put in place as a result of safety concerns. It's a continuous panel that bow and flex with heat and wind and various changing air pressures. So there's a threat of it actually falling off of the building. So we've placed in the development permit a condition that this be addressed to mitigate the concern of the aesthetics, and we're going to work with the applicant through the building permit process on that. So whether it be no bands or whether it be a reduction of them or a different material or something that doesn't give it that broken look. And so I've kind of covered this already, but construction of the boomerang will have to follow specifications that avoid the use of the brackets. And to address the light concern, we've been given the manufacturer's specifications for the boomerang, and they're indicating to us that it's 38 lumens per linear foot. You're probably wondering what 38 lumens per linear foot looks like. Before I go into that, I'm just going to point out that this location here doesn't have those supporting bands, so this is the look we're trying to achieve to give it a little bit more of a streamlined appearance. These are examples of rope lighting throughout town. The Best Western on the top left is the brightest at 150 lumens per linear foot. You can see that from, if you're walking down at Centennial Park, you can see it across the river. It's quite bright. The Regent Hotel right over here is 55 per linear foot. The credit union that was put in last year is the same, 55 as the Regent, and 150 on these canopies. Same here. To note with the boomerang is that it's actually 2 strips behind it. Each one is 19 lumens per foot for a combined total of 38. So we expect that it'll be considerably dimmer than these examples here. We were not able to find the specifications for the gas stations that exist on the highway, but we expect that it'll be at a level of intensity similar to those, if not lower.
Okay.
So here's some more photo examples of a similar design to give council a better indication of what this is going to look like. That's almost exactly what it is. You can see the bands there that we're trying to avoid here, just to give it a bit more of a clean look. And so with that, our recommendation is that the development permit be approved, subject to collection of the security and notification for the sign variances. We've built conditions into the permit, including adherence to the plans and landscaping that you have, some provisions surrounding snow removal and it being taken off the site by a private contractor, tree protection during construction for some existing trees that are on the boulevard, the limitations on the lumens that I just talked about, and the avoidance on the brackets. As I've mentioned before in previous presentations, if council wishes to supplement or change these conditions, you need to identify how the applicant can meet those conditions. I have the franchisee here, Jonathan McMurray, who's also available to answer any questions if needed.
So, you want to ask questions before we discuss the approval, Ron, or do you want us to start with making a motion and then asking the questions? Okay. So is there a counselor that would like to make a motion that's in your package? Councilor Brosseau.
So is it all one motion?
Yes, but you don't have to say it all.
Okay, that the application for development permits DP 2018-16 be approved, subject to carrying on as is in the agenda.
Notice be given with their intent to consider issuance and that financial security amount of $51,287.69 for that.
Okay, so is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Charlotte? Any discussion on the motion? Anyone have any questions of the proponent or Mr. Sturgeon? Councillor Charlotte?
In regards to the boomerang brackets, I'm assuming since there are some locations that have them and some locations that do not, it's based on the weather patterns of the area or the environmental patterns. The safety concerns concern me.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yeah, so the applicant made it clear to us that this was, they had been previously installed in the first round of renovations without the brackets, pretty much universally. When there was that safety concern, when that was brought up, that's when they began to install the brackets, and that's done standard everywhere. Obviously, we're no exception to temperature fluctuations, so that's where that comes from. Yeah.
Was there an actual incident that was involved in this, or was it just concerns?
Any incidents, Mr. Sturgeon, in the past? Mr. McMurray, you have...
I can answer that.
Yep.
So AEW installed these all about, well, we started 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that ago. The photo that you guys showed that had the no brackets, that's actually one of the AEWs I own. It now has brackets.
Okay.
Every AEW has brackets. I want to be very clear about that. There are none that don't have them. What happened was, is back east in Toronto, they actually had a lens fall out, thankfully at night. It fell out, smashed on the ground, and AEW went, whoa, time out. We need to make sure that doesn't happen in the middle of the day when we have customers walking around, which went to this bracket thing. We won't be able, we've tried. We've looked everywhere to find a way to do this without the brackets. Obviously, that's the look we're going for. We also, I'm very much on these guys' side. We don't like the brackets. We're going to talk to Electron, who's the manufacturer, and AEW Corporate to see if we can get away with less brackets, like reduce it from every 5 feet. But that being said, I highly doubt AEW or any engineer is going to agree to that. So.
Any other questions? Councillor Cross?
Yeah, Your Worship, I was just wondering if someone could enlighten me on why the canopy maximum area signage, or percentage of the area is being increased from 25 to 64. That seems like a massive increase in what we currently accept as a good norm.
Yeah, so through the chair, what it is if this piece of paper is the canopy, the maximum area for a sign occupies a portion of that canopy. They have a projecting canopy that looks like this, and they're putting their sign on the front. So it's effectively a fascia sign being attached to a canopy. We could have called it a fascia sign. We chose to call it a canopy sign because we're considering anything that attaches to the front of the canopy a canopy sign, so it's larger. You know, in response, A&W could say, okay, well, we're just going to take the fascia sign, we're going to move it on top.
Okay. So it's really the definition of canopy here, we're seeing such a large variance.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Anyone else? Councillor Beruschi, you have your hand ready to ask a question.
I'm wondering about the inclusion of no brackets as a condition. It doesn't seem like it's going to necessarily work.
So I guess if it, and I'll ask Mr. Sturgeon, if it was an engineering thing where they came forward and said the only way to have this boomerang on there is with these brackets, then there's no choice for us to change that. Is that correct?
It would become a life safety and a building permit issue. Our building official will be looking for sign off from the registered professionals on that. Having the condition in the DP sends the message to the applicant, which in this case can be seen as the corporate parent,
right.
that Revelstoke does have high standards for design, and we would like it to address those.
Okay.
But we do have some flexibility in our building permit process to consider a variation on that. as it stands right now, it's written down in the permit.
So it's not gonna come back to council because, say, down the road, their engineers say, no, it has to happen correctly.
I'm gonna defer the question to my director just to confirm that, but
Yeah, so with the word avoidance, we've talked with the applicant about going through the building permit process because they've highlighted us with some of the technical situations that were occurring. So we said we would work with them through the building permit with life safety, and if it becomes a life safety issue, then the building code would fall into place.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on the motion before you dealing with accepting this application? Councillor Elliott?
Not so much to this particular development permit, but the dark skies issue, that's come up in several development applications we've seen so far. Does that need revision or consideration in the OCP? Because I'm just curious.
the dark skies policy is a broad policy statement that's incorporated into the text of the OCP in sort of the chapters leading up to the development urban areas. It's not a condition, or sorry, a guideline contained within the actual development permit area guidelines. So we use the entire document to sort of inform our decision making, and we interpret those clauses and then apply them through the guidelines. And then we raise it as an issue to council when we feel it may be an issue. So it's not a cut and dry. In an ideal world, we would have a guideline that says outdoor lighting shall be restricted to the following: gooseneck lighting for signs, or if you have a backlit sign, it has to be this lumens per this area, like we've done. So it leads us to have to sort of come up with scenarios like this, where we look at examples and then specify a number and include it as a guideline and discuss it with council as what we see appropriate, until we are able to do OCP revisions and new design guidelines that would come up with better criteria.
I know our entranceway into Revelstoke from the west side has a searchlight pretty well, but how much you there? Yeah, so I'm just kind of curious where the consistency is. They're certainly not a dark sky entity, so.
Well, Councillor Elliott, we've turned that light down considerably.
Oh, yeah? Okay, well, it used to be,
We used to be able to see the moon with that one in the Luxor in Vegas. That was, and I was really happy with that. You could see the bats flying, right? So anyway, I'm supportive of this going forward. I just want to make mention of that. Mr. McMurray, I appreciate you coming to our community to spend some money and revamp that. Very awesome thing. So I'm going to ask if there's any other councillors that have any further discussion on the motion that's on the table. If not, I'm going to ask the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sturgeon. Mr. Cosman, thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to go on to staff report 12B, economic development, film policy. Is there any, Ms. Braun, any discussion on that or any presentation before we carry on? Or are you okay with what's in the package?
Your Worship, yes, I'm okay with what's in the package. I think you've got some idea of the scope of the potential with the industry being more active in Revelstoke. Having said that, the terms and conditions themselves do cover off most of the questions that were raised earlier. For instance, liability insurance is included in the terms and conditions, and they adhere to the best practices throughout the province. So they were developed primarily by the Building Commissioner. The policy itself was already developed when I took over this position with my predecessor with Donald. So.
Awesome. Okay. There's a motion on the table here. Someone want to present that? Councillor Ryan?
That filming within the city of Revelstoke policy CED-3 dated January 8th, 2001 be rescinded, and that the new filming guidelines within the city of Revelstoke policy CED-3 dated February 26th, 2019 be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Cross.
Yeah, I've read the new proposed policy in detail. I'm just a little concerned. Maybe I need some clarification here. It says policy procedure item 5, upon approval from the director, all impacted businesses and location are to be notified by the production company. It doesn't, so what I see maybe missing in the policy here is the approval of the impacted businesses to go along with this.
It seems like I'm worried we're gonna run over them, and they gotta live with it. They get notified, but they get no say.
Ms. Braun, would you care to?
That's a good point. It doesn't actually specify that any of the businesses affected have the power to retail the whole production. I think that would come to the attention of the directors and, relevant departments and be discussed as this is something that's seen to be problematic for businesses. We would certainly work with Chamber of Commerce and find a solution to mitigate that impact.
Do you think the policy could be improved by having something about businesses need to be consulted?
Yes, we have that in. Is that some of this policy development happened prior to my being here? Dawn, did you have any other suggestions on that? We were building on what was in place beforehand, which had no consultation of all businesses.
My personal experience with this film in the past with any movies, when they're on my portion of the street, I always had the film person come in. They're people that would be on the ground actually going door to door and saying, we're going to be filming in this area on this date. Do you have concerns on that? And if they use the building at all, they would definitely, there would be a stipend issue. If they weren't using the building, they would at least notify me. And I have several businesses in my building, so they would notify each of the business owners as well and go to them and say, if you have a concern, please let us know. This is what we're suggesting. And it seemed to work really well. So I didn't feel that we needed to have that in the policy because it seemed to be common practice within the industry. Now, I've had several, in the last, I guess, 15 years, we've had several films filmed in Revelstoke, but one in particular was in my building, and it was kind of a, I don't know, a murder mystery type film, and so they were very cautious as to how they approached the community and how they discussed how this was going to portray, and were very good to all the people involved. And I thought the industry as a whole has always been very conscientious. So that was my personal take on that. Mr. Chabot, do you have any comments?
Your Worship, the idea behind the policy was not to have to submit filming applications and permits to council for approval. Adds time, complexity, uncertainty to the process. I think what council should expect staff to do is to monitor, I think, community acceptance and satisfaction with filming and the way staff are administering the policy, and suggest adjustments as required. I think if we put a requirement in here that you needed the support of businesses, would that be the support of all? Because you'd most likely face a situation where you wouldn't see any filming happen in the commercial areas of the community anymore. And if it was a approval of all residents, it might be impacted as well. You might as well say goodbye to filming production in your community. I did want to note, because earlier with the discussion about the Brock Hoyer Way Home production, there was concern about extra costs of the RCMP. In Part 10 of the policy, or the procedure, I guess, talks about the applicant paying for all third-party out-of-pocket costs, including additional expenses incurred by the City of Revelstoke as a result of production, including RCMP costs, fire department costs, etc. So the idea is not to de facto provide subsidies to these things. As I mentioned, there would be a way to go about if council thought there was a municipal service going to be provided as a result of a production to provide some of that assistance, but it couldn't just be done on the spur of the moment. It would have to be a planned thing.
Sure. Thank you. Ms. Lowe.
Your Worship, it's also very similar to our noise exemption bylaw, where a certain area of people that are going to be affected by the noise have to be contacted by the person producing the noise. And then the director, or whoever's a designate to that bylaw, sits down and looks at the impact. So then it's not a council decision, it's the director's position, and that's what we were looking at when we were creating this policy, was that that Ingrid would be the liaison with the community, with the companies, to ensure that the businesses were informed.
But in the absence of an exemption, they must follow the provisions of the noise bylaw, which is, I think, probably a little different than a lot of communities, because production companies typically want to film in the middle of the night because they can strictly control light. And so if this, and I mean, you're not going to do this kind of production we're talking about earlier in the meeting, you're not going to do that in the night.
But that was the intent when we created the policy, was that the Director of Economic Development would ensure that businesses had the 7 days in advance, and she would be the liaison, and she would work with the businesses and the film company.
And I would add, Part 5 of the terms and conditions spells out the kind of information businesses receive, which includes a number of the director or the number of the Commissioner Commissioner Office, as well as the date of filming and description of activity. So if there is any feedback or concern, they have 7 days to contact our office or on the office.
Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Cross.
Yeah, this looks absolutely fantastic. I'm excited to see how the film industry is growing and having a bigger presence in Revelstoke. It's unique in this situation where we have 3 business owners sitting here that have businesses right downtown that have been affected in the past. And I've definitely seen it get smoother every time we have a film. Like they were mentioning before, the population is getting more accustomed to this. However, there are also still concerns. I know I've lost business because of filming going in front. What I would like to see is when we're talking about in number 7, we're talking here about traffic, but there's no mention of pedestrians. And since the filming is typically happening in downtown, it's the pedestrian impact that I'm more concerned about than the traffic impact. So I would love to see that mentioned in the wording. And then the other comment I would have as well is that as well as the businesses being notified, it would be great to see the Chamber of Commerce notified so that they could support their members and be aware of what's going on and not have to hear it from their members probably the day before the filming starts. We are like herding cats, unfortunately, and the Chamber is one of our networks that really helps us deal with this. I think one of the things I would like to work on as my role in the Chamber, that's the council liaison with the Chamber, is working with Ms. Braun and the film industry to put together a workshop for business owners that might be concerned, to look at ideas of how do you mitigate the impacts of filming in your business. Because I know when I get the notifications, I don't really know what to do about it. So to have that support as a group with that network and the strength of Chamber behind it, I think would go a long ways to make smoothing out any of the remaining kinks in this.
Okay. Councillor Cross.
Yes, Your Worship. I just don't think this policy is complete enough. I think it needs some more thought. I fully support the film industry. My own business downtown has been extremely supportive. Every film that's ever been done has come in and said we're the most friendliest business they've ever worked with. But I just have concerns about volume and how that's handled, at least when it had to go before council issuing a permit, even if there's no charge attached to it, could wadee the impact of multiple film projects in a row or something like that, or the impact of any one film project. So I'm not comfortable with this policy the way it's written at this point in time enough to vote in favor of it personally.
It's never come before council before, every time there's a film coming to the community, other than maybe to notify the community that, great, another film's going to be here, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's on page 193, and it says that there's no permit required, right? So we've moved the needle a bit, I think, in terms of better taking account of community and business concerns. We're happy to take a look at it again. I would urge council to support the amendments here and give us your thoughts on further refinements. Councillor Shirley has some good suggestions for improvements to it. I think we could clarify in part 7 the concern about access to businesses, and she talks about pedestrian access, because it does say streets in Revelstoke downtown will not be closed during retail business days unless. And point 2, adequate access is assured to adjacent businesses. I don't think that was intended to be exclusively vehicular access. I think it said you were going to maintain pedestrian access to those businesses as well. Right, but then later it talks about wind traffic. Well, that could be pedestrian or vehicular traffic, not necessarily cars.
I think,
but you're right, you've got to get this right, or community acceptance and a desire to welcome further film productions goes away, and you lose any economic benefit. And if it's offset by business loss for our small business owners, any gains, why are we doing it?
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree. I think, if you want to make some minor amendments now where we want to make sure that all businesses have that access, especially pedestrian access, and that, as Councillor Cross mentioned, that, all the businesses are notified and that the chamber is notified, those sorts of things, I would be supportive of changing those amendments. But then I would like to see this policy approved to go forward. If we find that there's difficulties with that once it's in place for some reason, then I think we need to have a look at it. But I think I want to be supportive in a way that the film industry knows that they can come here, they can spend their money here, and that we're supportive of that. Councillor Cross and then Councillor Charlotte.
Yes, so for the current policy, the way it's written here, if the notice period was changed from 7 days to preferably 21 days, I would be a lot more comfortable with it. Because a lot of owners, if they're away at the time they get notice, they have no chance to adjust staffing, they have no chance to bring concerns forward. I know a film that was done 2 years ago, I was away at the time the notice came, and it had a waiver of using our trademark name in the film. And I never signed that waiver, and our name was used in the film. So 7 days wasn't enough notice for me to actually sign off as the owner.
So what happens if we went 14 days? Do you think that's going to be suitable? And Ms. Brown, I'm going to ask you that question because I'm now looking at it and saying, what's going to be the minimal timeline that we need to be prepared for these people to come in?
I would say two things. I think that this policy has developed guidelines for built around best practices used across the province that film directors and producers themselves have had input into. For a large production that is going to affect multiple businesses for lengths of time that go beyond a one-day shoot, there is usually notice given well in advance of that. And I think I take your point about connecting with the chamber to ensure that there's some opportunity to communicate and mitigate that with the chamber and its members prior to the shoot. I think making it longer than 7 days would be an impediment and create a barrier for that economic activity. But I think there is, with the larger productions, ample opportunity to consult with the Chamber of Commerce prior to the kind of production that's going to be done.
I could live with 14 days in answer to your posed question, Your Honor.
Mr. Schumel.
Your Worship, just one thing that I think we could ask is that the Regional Film Commissioner attended a meeting of our local chamber just to tell them about how to work with film production in your community. I think that would be a good option.
In fact, we haven't really had a conversation about it or anything.
Okay, good, because I recall we did that in Fernie, and it seemed to help because then they knew, because sometimes there was a bit of a financial ask for business interruption, and a lot of folks had no idea about that. And so it was giving them the tools to respond. But in regards to 14 days, I don't know if that's too much, too little. I just contextualize it against the notice of public hearings for land use zoning amendments in the province, and its considered view thinks 10 days notice is enough, and sometimes that notice is mailed to foreign owners. I'm sure there's a number of times when those folks and their property is vacant, they're deprived any opportunity to have comment about something as significant as the change to the permitted uses on the property adjacent to their own. So 14 too much? Probably not. Right? Probably not a hardship, but
again,
maybe it's 10.
My experience has been, they're coming in a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and I've always had somebody come in plenty of time ahead of time. In the contract, if they were going to use the facility, would always be within that 7-day window prior to their arrival, just because they're getting their people on the ground, and let's say they're in Vancouver, to send out the notification to everybody that we're coming, here's the contract, here's that thing, and usually within a couple days before they show up, everybody receives a stipend, right? So that's the sort of thing that I've seen in the past. I'm okay with it exactly as it's written, with the amendment that we want to make sure that access to the businesses are fine, but you guys have to make some council sure.
Yeah. No, I realize this is how things have usually been done, is that notification is done in writing. So that's an actual physical piece of paper that goes into the business. I think what Councillor Cross is suggesting is that doesn't always work if we're not there. Modern day and age, we have email addresses for everyone. Could we maybe amend this to say in writing and by email, so that way the business owner, even if they are not there and the staff on hand do not pass it forward as they are supposed to, they would then have that opportunity to get it into their email inbox, which would follow them wherever they go. And most business owners I know do keep an eye on that. It might not be as organized as we'd like, but we keep an eye on that. Would that be something that we could modify on this?
I agree, that makes sense.
The policy does say at least 7 days before. It doesn't say it can't be 20 or 30.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Longer is better, but again, the physical letters, I've had mine go missing before because the staff put it in a stack of paper. I would love to get it by email.
And I think at least 7 days, that covers off those smaller productions that are really line and pick on, wasn't completed very quick.
Well, and I would imagine emails are a lot easier to send out than hand delivering letters.
Well,
So we might get them easier.
That's kind of the standard that's set by the film industry itself. It's called paper in town. They have to do that.
And that's fine on top of.
On top of it now, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to get back to the motion here. We're amending this motion with a few things, is that correct? We're going to make sure there's access.
Pedestrian. Specifically saying pedestrian.
Okay.
It just helps bring people's awareness that there's more than just cars in our downtown.
Okay. And then the notification is going to be electronic and paper?
Correct.
Okay. And now we come down to, it says at least 7 days in the act. Can all of you live with that? Can you not? I need to know.
7 business days, can I ask?
Sure. You can ask.
You could put that in if you like. That would make it longer, right?
Yeah,
More
7
about
business
10
days is
days.
going to give you at least 10 days, right? Right? So you're okay with that? Everybody else okay with those amendments? I know I'm asking before you take the vote.
And
Councillor
also
Shaw.
adding the Chamber of Commerce as one of the places to be notified.
Okay, and the chamber to be notified. Ms. Brown, you have that as well?
Yes, I'm going to go with that, and I'm also going to add them on the application form itself, where it describes details of use and lists the different city departments, all at the Chamber of Commerce. Fantastic, thank you.
So do we need to do an amended motion, or we just amended this and we can just vote on this?
Yeah.
Any further discussion on this film stuff? Councillor Ellis.
For the major productions, there's usually if there's a business interruption, there's a statement that goes back to the business.
Yeah, they come into each business in Blackwood. So a prime example was the last Hallmark. I think they hung a wreath on the front of my building and they filmed in front of it. And they gave a small amount of money saying, hey, we're going to be here for 2 hours on this day, sort of thing. I got a great kick out of it because it was a wreath on the front of the funeral home. But by the same token, that was just a personal, some people saying.
And we typically the economic development or the chamber would be the mediator between businesses and the film companies.
Yeah, and sometimes the film companies come themselves. So in my situation, Mr. Barritt came himself, and then he introduced the production people, and they came and dealt with all the stuff. They got my information, they got everything, and then they notified me by email as to what they were doing. And then when their production was on hand, there was a fellow came right into my place and said, hey, we're here. We're going to be doing this in the next week or so.
If there's a real adverse impact on one business because of the event or because of the filming, is there any resolution mechanism?
I've never seen that happen before. They always want to, at least in my experience, always want to negotiate with the business owner or the building owner to say, hey, how can we make sure we can do this? So in past films and whatnot, sometimes they would film in the evening, but you would come downtown and it would look like it was daytime because everything was lit up. And they would do that so they wouldn't actually impact businesses because of that sort of thing. So getting back to this resolution with the changes that we've made, is everybody comfortable on that? Ms. Braun, is it clear?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to ask that question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Where the heck are we? Okay, we're going on to engineering. 12C, receiving the Big Eddy Water Upgrade Project. Someone want to make that motion? Councilor Beruschi.
that the Phase 3 Big Eddy Water Upgrade Project report be received for information.
And seconded for that motion, Councillor Cross. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Cross.
Just wondering, through you, Chair, for Mr. Thomas, and perhaps for Mr. Chabot, just wondering what the situation is with the former lands that, the Big Eddy office lands that were, I think, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, these were originally mentioned as they would be potentially sold and that money used to help fund the Big Eddy Water Project. And I'm wondering where that is at.
Your Worship, I'll let Mr. Thomas fill in where he can if I go astray, but I think the concern was the Big Eddy Water Board and the trustees were concerned that the city might vacuum up any value in capital assets or land that they own for the benefit of general revenue or city taxpayers. And our assurance to them was that any disposal of assets that belong to the Big Eddy Improvement District were for the credit of the Big Eddy Water System. As to the disposition of any surplus land there, we haven't made any determination or come up with a recommendation to council, although I know we've had some rather casual conversation about the location where there was surplus land in an office building may in the future be an appropriate location for parking for people to access the Dyke Trail and the Greenbelt. Is that sort of what we were thinking?
Certainly an option, yes.
Yeah, so no decisions made yet, but certainly if there were, and if it were an opportunity to fund some of the shortfall on the works we wanted to complete, that should be considered as well. So once the works are tendered and we know what bid prices are, we'll know better what we're looking at in terms of having to take out of a project list that was desirable.
And at that point, council could look at the options for maybe selling land to help fund the thing as opposed to raising taxes.
Yeah, we should probably take a look at that at a committee of the whole. Maybe would be a place to have an informal conversation with council about what exists and what its uses might be.
Good. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion on the table?
The estimate for $1 million, is that, you think that's reliable?
Your Worship, as you read the report, you can see that our consultants have underestimated the cost in the past 2 years. The first year was largely underestimated at around 25%, under the tendered cost.
The same engineers, same consultants?
Yes. Last year, they revised their estimates significantly, and I think they were around 2% under, something like that. We are fairly confident with this $1 million sort of round number estimate of the total cost of all of the work. So that's not the tendered cost, that's the total cost of everything involved in the project, including engineering and everything. So certainly want to make sure that we are not exceeding that sort of cost, unless there's some really pressing reason to. So when we do tender this, and we get get these numbers back from the contractors, we'll be assessing what work we can get done within the budget and bringing a recommendation to council for how to proceed.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gross.
Yeah, just for those perhaps watching on video, I just wanted to clarify and make sure I've got it right too, is that we have $846,000 in previously approved funding available. We're talking about a potential $150,000 shortfall, roughly, on the latest estimate, right? Just to clarify that $1 million.
So don't scare anyone.
Yeah. Well, that would be, yeah. We're talking 150, not $1 million.
Any further discussion on the motion on the table?
Just the third phase, the last phase, that's the reservoir, is that right?
Your Worship, the priorities are listed in the options discussion part, so I'll just read out what the high priorities are. So purchase and install the vertical turbine pump in well 3. So we've already drilled well 3. It's ready to go, except it doesn't have a pump in it yet. Connection of that well to the main. And then
We have some water mains that we need to connect from Highway 23 South up to the reservoir site, so we logged that earlier this winter. And then there would be the construction of a 1,400 cubic metre steel reservoir, and then lastly it'd be, and all that goes along with that, so there's valve chambers and other equipment up there, and then lastly it'd be relocating the BC Hydro Service to the reservoir site. And then the medium level priorities are the installation of 10 fire hydrants. I believe they've already been purchased, so they're sort of, it would just be the installation part, and then upgrades to a small number of water services that are remaining. One of the things with those medium priorities is that our original plan for this, for the Big Eddy water upgrade, when like prior to receiving the grant, was that it was a 20-year plan. That we were going to try and get all of these things done over a period of 20 years. We applied for the grant, and now we had a large amount of money to spend in a much shorter period of time than 20 years. And we weren't sure how much of that we would actually get done within that grant. Interestingly, the approximately $150,000 that we're talking about is about the same cost as the fairly unexpected archaeological costs that we incurred in 2017. So certainly, had we not incurred that level of expenditure on the archaeological costs, we'd probably be a lot closer to getting everything done within the allocated budget.
Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Okay, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. I'm going to move on to staff report 12D. There is a amendment there to be read. Someone want to read that? Councillor Cross.
Yeah, that the amendment to the 2019 to 2023 financial plan timeline be approved.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'm just wondering if there's any appetite for switching the time of the community budget consultation meeting on March 7th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Ms. Lowe, first of all, what are the implications regarding notification to the public on that time frame?
So, Your Worship, I'm going to refer that to Councillor. Are you Councillor now?
Just gotta like your
Ms. McKay.
Has something.
Okay.
I actually have a bit of a conflict if we move the time any later in the day, like especially that late in the day. A little bit later would be okay, but it does create a problem for me because of some prior commitments. Okay. So shifting the date would then be the other alternative, but we do not want to shift it later because we want to make sure people have time to give their feedback before the 12th.
Can you, Councillor Cross, Mr. Chabot, you want to weigh in?
I'm just concerned that this date and time has been published and advertised and notice has been given in a manner of ways. There's been some confusion about whether it was March 5th or 7th. Every time we change it, I think we shake more people off that might have had an interest to participate and give feedback. We should probably make exception. This is Committee of the Whole on the 7th.
Yes.
Probably live stream that meeting, because the idea behind it is that people can watch it, and then they've got until March the 12th to submit comment. If they thought more about the city's budget, then they could do that, right? So yeah, we're happy to consider another day, but I think it's critical that Director of Finance be at this meeting, just in case there are questions, and Council may want to discuss options respecting the financial plan as well.
Councillor Cross and Councillor Charlotte.
That was exactly my point. It's a committee of the whole timing, and that if we video taped it and streamed it, that the public still has time to input. And I would really appreciate that because, as you know, Your Worship, I'm away on a prior business commitment during that time, which I just, consulting engagement in the United States, so I can't change that. And I would very much like to hear what the public has to say.
Perfect. Good idea. Appreciate that. Councillor
Yeah, I would second. I was going to ask whether or not it was going to be on video because I would hope that it would. It's the kind of information that I think I know I would benefit from seeing it more than one time, so being able to go back to it would be great. I have two questions then. One is related to the timelines. This is an amended timeline. I don't remember, trying to remember if we had the public meeting on our previous timeline or if this was more.
It was on March 5th in our budget documents that we all got.
Right.
So I think that's why it's considered an amended timeline.
Okay.
So we're looking at March 5th, and there was some confusion even with Councilor Juncker and myself. He'd asked me, he'd tell me the time, and I said the 5th is in my documents, and then I found out that it had been indeed amended. So.
Right. And did we get the time of the meeting, or was it just the day?
I think we would have the time at 3 o'clock in there.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Then that's on me for not having brought it back, or asking earlier in order to have that conversation about changing the time and the date. The other question I have for you is, since we'll have it on live video, is there any appetite, or is it possible to have a volunteer moderator to come if anyone were to ask questions online, to have those questions brought forward to the Director of Finance at that time when she's available, if someone were, for instance, not able to come in person?
That's,
Your Worship, they can ask questions at any time to the budget email.
Okay.
And that, all those would be presented to council at a later meeting. So any questions or concerns that come forward, you will know about.
Right. And then when those concerns come forward, that's going to be at another committee of the whole meeting, correct? Would it be possible to have, or be desirable to have that televised as well?
don't see why not.
If you would like.
Yeah, just to have it very much out in the open, just to set
When is that?
a tone.
When is that coming back?
21st.
Thank you. Okay.
Like, I realize there's a reason to have informal conversation, but this is an important discussion to have. And to be able to air those questions in a way that people would then see the answers
Great solution.
in a personal, more personal way.
Okay, it's a great
Rather
way,
than writing.
great way to engage.
Okay.
Yep, appreciate you guys bringing that forward.
Great.
Any other questions or concerns on the amended timeline? So I'm going to ask if everybody's happy, March 7th, 3 p.m., we're going to live stream it. People have input, they can contribute their input to the 12th, and then it'll come back to us the 21st, I guess, and go from there. Okay, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're going on to the next item, which is report from the Director of Finance. Be received for information. So does someone want to bring that motion forward? Councillor Elliott?
The report from the Director of Finance dated February 14, 2019, titled Guide to 2019 Draft Budget and Long-Term Financial Plan, be received for information.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Sherlett.
Sorry, I'm trying to bring out my notes here quickly. So normally I would try to keep my comments to the functionality of things. I do have, I'm not an expert designer in any way, shape, or form, but I do have a lot of experience with the impacts of design on readability. I'm concerned that there's a few spots in this where the gradients used in certain boxes mean that the contrast between the text and the background is minimal, and that older eyes have a really hard time with that. I'm not going to pick apart design, I'm not a fan of it, but that's not the point. I would just rather see it all clean, white backgrounds, no gradients. Let's not try to make this pretty in an 80s way. Let's just make it readable.
Okay, good point taken, and I think we'll let everybody know they can in the future deal with that in a different way. Any further discussion on this in front of us? So the report will be received for information. Can I ask that question? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Part number 2. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Rind?
That the guide to the 2019 draft budget and long-term financial plan guide be approved for publication as submitted.
Seconder on that motion. Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Sherlett.
I was reading through this because this is part of the thing I was really excited about was the community engagement, and I've got a variety of notes here. This is the final version that would then go out to the public? Okay, so on page 11, there is some wording that I'm a little bit leery about. So one, it says provision for a stable 3% annual increase in property taxes in 2020 and 2021. I'm concerned that might be strong wording and setting ourselves up for, but you said it was going to be stable. And we're waiting on a lot of big reports coming in, where I'm under the impression that we're hoping, but there might be some other changes. I'm concerned about the strong language in this. I don't want to couch it and get too passive, but that seems really strong.
But that's in relation to the general operating fund, general operating expenses, right? That's basically a statement. That's basically the floor to maintain core service levels where they are.
Okay.
And that any operating spending additions or capital will increase beyond
Just for
that.
the layperson would not necessarily see that.
Page 11.
This is page 11 I'm seeing, yeah. Also in that same table, increase in budgets for internal vehicle equipment charges after 2019 to cover the true cost of vehicle equipment maintenance, operations, and it looks like that sentence got cut off.
Mine says replacement.
Mine says replacement as well.
Okay. Yes, and this is where I got a little bit concerned that I didn't have, it doesn't, it just got cut off.
This got republished too, because there was corrections made, right?
Okay, and I'm looking at my old one because that's the one I made my notes
This
on.
was updated yesterday, so some of the comments you might have.
Okay.
This morning.
So operations and results? Replacement. I'm wondering if there's room to put a little bit more clarity in that. The attitude that I get from the public is that the city drives around a whole lot of new vehicles. The impression I've gotten from the reports in committee of a whole was that we're trying to move away from leasing vehicles. So this would be a more functional bit, but I don't see any comments anywhere in the document talking about that plan. Just because I have heard a lot of comments on the vehicles, I think this might be a topic that would be worthy of clarifying a bit more.
I think, do we not buy our vehicles at auction?
A lot of sometimes.
Sorry, just ask that question. That's what I understand.
Page 11 stuff.
Yeah, I can see how we could clarify, because later on we talked about reserve and surplus and trying to move towards a debt-free future and how that's going to free up money otherwise spent on interest. That without detailed knowledge of the budget and this stuff like council is getting, you wouldn't be able to make that connection.
Okay, so clarify.
Which one are you talking about, sorry? The internal equipment store?
Yes.
Yeah, just because I know it was a big part of our conversation, where we really seemed to dig into that a little bit. And maybe it won't turn into anything, but might warrant just another phrase or two. So I know.
I'm just thinking that maybe a solution here, just if I could throw it out, is something, and I read the whole report, I just can't remember ever seeing something like this in there, that some phrase of reference that clearly states that annual spending decisions are decided by council every year, you know. So we've got a plan, and rather than, you know, unintentionally mislead the public that this is already predetermined or preordained, some statement somewhere that this is the plan subject to council revision every year at budget time.
Page 4, the under overview, sort of details that. It outlines steps in building the city's budget and long-term financial plan. And then it goes in point 5, council considers and approves the core operating and capital budgets, and then reviews and approves operating and capital spending that will be included in the draft budget. So there's a bit of a build-up. It's describing a bit of the policy process around that.
And maybe we can clarify.
It is complicated, right? Like, at least we're not trying to give the public the 146-page details.
I would just, so maybe 5 could be, you know, more specific. 5 seems not that clear, so maybe we could just call that out better or something. Just a thought.
On page 4 now? Because that's actually the steps in the actual.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I would just make, my suggestion is just make it really clear for people who want to read this, that this is a living plan that is subject to council review and revision every year. And I think that might answer some of
Yeah, I think that'll help,
concerns.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I just had one last comment.
Okay.
Right near the end, or I guess almost the end, page 22, there talks about debt. And
It's being changed.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw
Sorry.
Yeah, I talked about no new debt, but the graph shows it going up in 2021, 2022,
Yeah.
2023. We fixed that problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
Thanks, though.
I also, well, and that actually wasn't my concern. I was wondering if we could go farther back into history and show the last couple of years. Because I imagine what I remembered was the debt level's gone down dramatically. Has it not? We're addressing this issue that the community addressed. So can we show that and celebrate that win?
I will certainly, it certainly can. I think, and it can be done because I have that information. It's just going to be what it does to the width and the readability of the graph. But
because we're just looking at the trends, right? But to be able to see that downward trend of actuals, not just forecasted.
Go back enough years to show that it's actually been going down over time.
Because that was the impression I'd gotten.
It has been.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. It has been.
So that's when we're talking about looking to celebrate the wins of our city and the work we've been doing. That was a concern that was addressed. I can then bring that to chamber and say, hey, look, this is why.
Yeah. That shouldn't be too difficult of a change to make.
Okay, and it doesn't have to go very far. Just a couple of years would be enough. So,
I think I might have 3 or 4. So
perfect.
check and see.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't actually remember.
So with those amendments, are you comfortable with agreeing to this motion? All right, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Going on to correspondence, Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'd like to declare a conflict as I'm the president of the North Columbia Environmental Society.
Thank you.
So in the letter that's here from the North Columbia Environmental Society, they had to have been talking with Councillor Elliott because they've asked for a change where we no longer have plastic bags or single-use plastic bags in the community. So any comment on the letter? Councillor Elliott, would you like to weigh in?
I've been reading a lot of these municipal magazines about the environmental sustainability and what we should be doing. And I've been talking to several members of the North Columbia Environmental Society, and I said, it may not be the panacea, it may not be the solution, it may not be the total answer, but it's a start. And it just shows we're on our direction to build a sustainable community. This is just maybe a drop in the bucket of what we need to do, but it might be an indication, it sends a message to our community that we should be moving faster in that direction of making it a sustainable one.
Councillor Sherwood.
I would be cautious about what message we send to other sections of our community as well. I know that myself as a business owner and most of the business owners in our community are trying to move this way anyways because we see the writing on the wall. We know what's right for our community and we are trying. I read through the resource page that they've linked to for Victoria and I was impressed by their process of how they went about doing this. It was more than just a digital survey. They engaged their stakeholders, they engaged the business community. If we were to look at moving forward with this, I would expect us to work with the Chamber of Commerce, to work with the businesses to say, how do we make this doable for you? What are you already working on? Because I agree, this is not, single-use plastic bags are not the biggest part of the problem. It's the habits of the customers when they go shopping. I spoke to this at the Sustainable Living Expo, where I said, when we go to the gym, if you forget your gym bag, you go home for it. But I have customers walk in, oh, I forgot my bags in the car. But that's too far for them to go. They expect a disposable option. So there's a big part of that conversation that needs to happen with the consumers, and I think the businesses would be all for getting on board with that. But if we were going to go down this route, I would expect us to go down that route with the businesses, not on their behalf.
Right. And I think that's a prudent statement. Both of you, Councillor Cross, Councillor Sherwood, have businesses, and I'm assuming you use some sort of bag for people to carry their product out in. And so this may affect you in some way, and you would be able to weigh in as to what best suits you. In my business, we do have a reusable bag to carry out, but it's for items like cremated remains. And I'm bringing that, you're laughing, Councillor.
No, I'm not.
We don't carry the casket in our bag, we don't use it, but, so those are the sorts of things that we need to look at. And so what's the best route for not only your businesses, but for other businesses? So I think having a plan going forward, or working with the chamber, and maybe you guys could work with the chamber and the NCES to figure out a way to really work with community partners, i.e. your businesses, other businesses. How do you approach that? I don't know what the alternative is, right? Councillor Cross.
Yeah, I think you made some great comments there, Your Worship, and I would just say as a retail business owner, and as someone who did a lot of work in the environmental field for over a decade, single-use plastic is one of the most destructive things we have. You can always argue the environmental impact of options and stuff, but there's no doubt in my mind from the evidence and the reports I've read over the years that single-use plastic is one of the most destructive. So I would like us to support this kind of thrust going forward and figure out a way to make that happen. I have to have a bag. I think retailers have to have a bag option, but recycled paper or a bag you could buy that's reusable. I actually favor recycled paper because the bags you get, they don't always meet everybody's needs, and you just end up with a pile of these at home, which eventually become landfill anyway. So I think a recycled paper bag at this point in society is probably the best option. But I really support the North Columbia Environmental Society's initiative here, and I think it would be a great signal for us as a community to be able to send that we cared about this enough to ban single-use plastic.
So at this point,
with a phased-in approach.
There's no motion with this, but I'm going to ask you as councillors: is there a way that you feel that you could go to the chamber, or that some initiative is put, and I'll put it on you, Councillor Sherlock, but I want to include Councillor Elliott, that he goes with you, because he's been pounding on me, we need to get rid of this single-use plastic bag, and I fully agree, but the question is, what do we go to? And I like your thoughts on a recycled paper bag. I've always loved going to the grocery store. When I was a kid, you got the paper bags, and you could use them for so many things, whether it's covering your books or just burning them in the fireplace to light your wood fire. Sorry, Ms. Lowe, I'm probably stepping on your toes as to the proper process here, but anyway.
I just have a thought popping into my head with respect to, you do have an environmental committee, and Mike is the liaison, and I was wondering if has this gone to the environmental committee?
The environmental committee was fundamental in the creation and distribution of that survey.
Yes.
They're very well aware of this as an issue, and I feel like it would be appropriate if council wants some further analysis on it for it to go to the environment committee. I think the one thing that I would suggest is it's not as simple a matter as the impact of grocery bags on the environment, particularly in a community like Revelstoke. It's not as simple an issue as saying we should just ban them because they're single-use plastics. I think there's a whole range of issues that need to be considered, including the environmental cost of the alternatives. And then, are we actually seeing these things having an environmental impact in our community's environment? And I think that's critical from my perspective. If they're not a large component of landfill waste. You can scrunch a bag up to almost nothing. So in terms of volume of waste and weight of waste, they're not a major contributor to the lifespan of the landfill. From an environmental perspective, I don't walk around the community and see plastic bags flying around the street or down on the Columbia River or in Williamson Lake. So I would be concerned to say that this is an environmental issue that's directly related to Revelstoke. I think one of the things that a lot of communities have said is that this is more likely a provincial or federal government issue that needs to be addressed, in terms of how we deal with these things across the nation. Being a community that wants to lead in environmental things, that's another reason for doing this, but it also may cause other challenges. Our biggest issue is probably that we don't have all the information on the cost of the alternatives from an environmental perspective. Your Worship, if I could give you one example, in Ontario, the Liquor Board in Ontario decided that they'd go to full paper bags. They started out with 40% recycled paper in their bags. They found that they had to double or triple bag the bottles to fit 4 bottles in a bag. So they've gone for their 4 bottle bag is now back to 100% virgin paper. And so this is part of the problem. It's like they are trying to solve one problem, but without good consideration of the environmental impacts of all of the other solutions.
Mr. Chabot?
Your Worship, no, I think this is an important issue and deserves the kind of consideration Mr. Thomas speaks of. I would be concerned if council were to say, yes, we're going to support single-use plastic bag ban or plastic bag ban by July 1st, 2019, as the letter suggests. I think, as council suggested, work with the chamber, talk about it. Most progressive modern businesses today are moving towards a reduction in plastic use, of supporting reusable containers. A lot of consumers are declining bags when they're not necessary. I shop with reusable bags. They have environmental impacts as well. I don't intend to replace them anytime soon. There's public health issues as well. People need to be educated to wash their cloth grocery bag once in a while.
Councillor Charlotte, and then Councillor Ryan, and then Councillor Cross.
I'm excited to see the support around council and some worthy questions, because I sell cast iron. The idea of going to paper bags in rainforest terrifies me. So there are concerns there.
Sure.
And we have talked about this around the Environmental Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, our meeting got canceled this past round, and then the next round, it's the same time as our budget meeting, so we're having some issues with timing that I was hoping to talk to staff about soon. To get that more on track to go forward, because I think that we could direct this back to the Environmental Advisory Committee to work with the Chamber of Commerce to come up with a plan of what this looks like for Revelstoke, for a made in Revelstoke solution that's tenable to our businesses. Because I think they will be hardcore on board with this. The other thing I wanted to mention was that when we were in Kelowna for training, Mr. Lindstone had mentioned that his law firm is preparing a series of green bylaw templates, one of them being a single plastic ban, and that would be available for free for municipalities to be able to work from. So that would take a huge workload off of our staff.
Right.
And by the time that comes out, maybe we have some discussion going around with the NCES, the Chamber of Commerce, and we can come up with some sort of modification of that would be suitable for our community.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say about Don and his, those templates I think will be very useful, but also I think if we just wait for the province or federal government to take action, it could take a long time, and municipal levels is a nice chunk. I agree that we should take our time to make sure that it works for our community, but I like the idea that good habits can be started on a small scale, and you create those habits now, and then you go to another community, and then you're used to bringing your reusable bag, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important to take action because we can, even if it's not directly impacting Revelstoke as much as.
Yep. Perfect. Appreciate that input. So Councillor Cross and Councillor Elliott.
I'm fine, Your Worship. I think my points were covered by previous council.
Councillor Elliott.
I think Jackie touched on it exactly. Small steps start here.
We got to do it.
And those steps begin. And we're making moves towards our waste management, our reducing our food waste. I think that's coming in the pipeline here. This is maybe not be the total right decision, but it tells the world or tells our community we're moving and we're making progress, and we're making a green kind of move towards a more sustainable life in our town. And it may not be right, and there's no guarantee that we have to say it's gonna be a fine if you don't do that. Get rid of your inventory, work it out, and come up with a substitute.
Yeah.
But it tells them, we got rid of plastic straws and a flash. Why can't we do it with plastic bags?
Well, and it's just finding the alternative that's amenable to.
Yeah, I say,
to business
people got
using the-
plastic wooden straws. I don't know what
So I'm just going to suggest that councillors, Councillor Charlotte, if you could talk to the environmental people, talk to the chamber, and see if there's some sort of way of working forward, then we can make some headway on this. Is that okay with everyone else?
Yeah.
All right. So, any questions? Can we bring our councillor back in, please? Don? Don?
Have a cigarette break.
Mr. Orlando, any questions from the press?
Yeah, Your Worship, I do have one question. I noticed during the discussion on two different items, the most recent one, the plastic bag ban, as well as during the policy discussion on the filming policy for Revelstoke, that many of the comments, or several of the comments by yourself, Your Worship, as well as several different councillors, were filtered through references to their businesses, the impact on their businesses, how it impacted their businesses, to a lesser extent with the plastic bag ban, but more so with the film discussion. So the primary concern was how it would impact downtown retail businesses. But in fact, a film could be filmed anywhere when it comes to town. My question is there any concern at the council table regarding potential fiduciary conflicts when discussing these types of issues with specific reference to individual business owners at the table?
Well, to be quite honest, I hadn't even thought about it in that way. I guess I would have to look to Mr. Chabot and Ms. Lowe to indicate if that would be a problem for us. But thank you for bringing that question. I don't know whether I can answer that right at the moment, but Councillor Charlotte, you want to?
I don't mind speaking to this a little bit, because my intent of mentioning my business and my experience with it is, this is the experience I bring to the table. And these are the things that I've seen through my role in Chamber of Commerce as well, talking with other businesses in that particular case. My hope is that would apply to businesses in other areas of the community as well, that vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic happen all over. Beyond that, it wasn't so much that I would expect my business to get an exception or something special out of this. It was more just from my own experience.
Any other, Councillor Cross?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's a great question, Aaron. I would say, though, I listened carefully in those, and I think the frame of reference that was offered to each case was a positive one and not a restrictive one. And I think that is a realistic thing to expect, especially in a smaller town council.
Also, I'm not sure we had quorum without full review.
Anything further, Aaron? I don't know whether we answered your question.
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused about the last comment that Councillor Ryan made about quorum.
So I just was thinking, like, people that have businesses downtown, is there not four?
Yeah. But it doesn't, yeah.
Sorry, excuse me, I guess your question was, are we concerned about, can you read your question again specifically?
It comes off the top of my head.
Just concerned about conflict regarding fiduciary.
I think we're very concerned about that.
Your Worship, the word I heard you use, Aaron, was a fiduciary conflict. Did you mean a pecuniary conflict, a financial one?
Either one of those.
Okay. I think in this instance, this is falls under the exception of an interest in common. Just like business owners get to vote on commercial tax rates, they apply to everyone. The impacts of filming in our commercial downtown can apply equally. And the subject we saw today was folks going to film both in commercial and residential areas, so it impacts a broad part of the community. So I personally have no concern with them sharing their experience to help inform a better policy. I think that's what council's elected to do.
Any further questions, Aaron?
Your Worship, no, thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for your time. I'm going to ask for a motion to go in camera pursuant to sections 90.1A and L of the Community Charter. Councilor Brooks Hill, Councilor Ryan, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.